I am not receiving word that, oh, we are live. Okay, we're live now. We were a little delayed there. Sorry about that, folks. Good evening. I'm Mayor Manheimer, and I'd like to welcome you to the January 12th City Council meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through holding these council meetings virtually. We've been doing it for a while now, but still working on kinks every once in a while. To help our audience follow along, I will state each section of the agenda out loud. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by dialing 1-855-925-2801 and entering the code 9471. We are also broadcasting live on the city's YouTube channel, the Charter Cable channel 193, and on AT&T Uverse channel 99. So for those of you out there with us tonight, welcome. For public comment, we ask callers to sign up in advance to join the live speaker queue. Callers had until 9 o'clock this morning to sign up for tonight's meeting. As stated at the December 8th meeting, this is a longer sign-up window than previous meetings. We heard your feedback about the public comment process, and we hope providing a longer window allows the public more time to review the agenda and to sign up to speak. Staff will continue to work on improving this process to provide greater accessibility for those who wish to comment during a meeting. We will only be taking live comments from those who signed up prior to tonight's meeting. Those callers have been provided instructions on how to participate. Each caller is allotted 3 minutes to speak for each agenda item. We will hear live comments for up to 1 hour for each agenda item. A reminder to callers, you will first hear staff inform council that you are next to speak. Then you will hear an automated message letting you know you're unmuted and live in the meeting. You may begin speaking after the automated message. To best ensure staff can support you in the case of technical difficulties, we ask that you join the queue no later than the beginning of the agenda item before the agenda item on which you have signed up to speak. Additionally, if you've joined the speaker queue and need to disconnect before your time to speak, please hit *4 before hanging up. You can then call back in using the same directions I just shared, and staff will enter you back into the speaker queue of your agenda item. I would like to ask all those participating in tonight's public comment to follow council's rules of decorum. These rules include the following. Speakers are only allowed to speak one time during the public comment period for each agenda item. A person may speak only if they have signed up to speak in accordance with the city's procedures. Speaker substitutions at the meeting are not allowed. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak on an agenda item. In general, each agenda item will have up to a total of 1 hour for public comment. A speaker may not share or relinquish any remaining time they have not used to another speaker. Speakers should not expect council members or city staff to comment on or respond to the speaker's comments during their 3 minutes. Okay, I'm going to now go through and introduce all the council members and staff leadership who are on this Google meeting. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Vice Mayor Smith.
Hello.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Hi.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Hello.
Councilwoman Roney.
Good evening.
Councilwoman Turner. Are we missing Sage?
Oh, I had gotten the computer mute. We're okay. Hello.
Okay. Councilwoman Whistler.
Good evening.
And our city manager, Deborah Campbell.
Good evening.
Our city attorney, Brad Branham.
Hello, everyone.
And our city clerk, Maggie Burleson.
Good evening.
Okay, we'll begin the agenda. And as always, we will begin the agenda with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, under presentations this Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a page. We do actually have a proclamation this evening. We haven't had many during our virtual meetings, but we do have a timely proclamation this evening, honoring our frontline workers, our city employees in particular, who have been out there throughout this pandemic on the front line. And I'm going to read the proclamation, and then the city manager is going to say a few words. So I'm going to pretend everyone, we would normally see this proclamation in the chamber, but it's all virtual tonight. So here's the proclamation. Whereas for much of 2020, Asheville, North Carolina faced challenges and unknown risks due to COVID-19 and the resulting pandemic. And whereas many of the city of Asheville's employees were identified as frontline and on-site workers required to work in city buildings and directly in the community. And whereas these frontline and on-site workers were asked to continue working in the field in order to provide ongoing services to our community. And whereas these employees accepted the increased risks from their jobs and showed up daily to provide critical services to our community, and whereas these employees demonstrated their commitment to public service, and whereas the city of Asheville recognizes the significant work and sacrifices of our frontline and on-site employees, and are especially grateful for their service to the residents of Asheville. Now, therefore, I, Esther Mannheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, do hereby proclaim January 12th, 2021 as City Employee Heroes Day in Asheville, and call upon residents of Asheville to recognize the work of our frontline and on-site City of Asheville employer, the city, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Campbell to say a few words.
So again, good evening. Actually, Happy New Year. Mayor and Council, we are so grateful to you all. And I think I can say this without prejudice, all of our city employees, especially the City of Asheville's on-site and frontline workers with this proclamation. Our frontline and on-site workers deserve this recognition and so much more. I'm also thankful, grateful, appreciative for all the lives of people in Asheville. Greatly appreciate the proclamation. We appreciate them. And we also wanted to let the community names of these employees will be scrolled on the Harris Cherokee Center marquee. So again, thank you so very much, employees, but also thank you, City Council and Mayor, for this acknowledgement of all the work that these staff and employees do on a daily basis. Thanks again.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell, and thank you to all the staff that we're recognizing this evening. This has been an unprecedented year this last year, everyone trying to figure out exactly how to make things move forward and continue to deliver services to the community while doing our best to keep it safe and our employees showing up every day. So that's there to be commended for that. Council, anyone have any other comments they'd like to make? Any regarding this, or just clapping? We're clapping. Okay. All right. So that was our one proclamation this evening. We're going to move now to the consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions, comments regarding the consent agenda before I entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda? No? If I have none, is there someone who can make a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I'll second. Gwen.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and I need to check my sign-up sheet and see if we have anyone signed up to speak on the consent agenda. I feel like we did have one speaker. Yes, we have one person who signed up to speak under the consent agenda. Staff, if you've got anyone, if you've got that person on the phone, could we please hear from the public?
Yes, Mayor, we have Greenleaf Clark from North Asheville.
Hi, this is Greenleaf Clark calling from North Asheville. I'm checking in on the consent agenda because although, again, things get piled into this with the expectation of it getting passed with no pushback, I think there's pushback warranted. The first three items of the consent agenda are what I'm going to speak to. Item A, approval of the minutes for the formal meeting held on December 8th. Just to be clear, for any listeners who don't know, last month, our city council heard hours of public comments from us denouncing the over $100,000 APD budget increase that was weaseled in, including $62,000 for new assault rifles like the ones used to murder Jerry Williams. And yet the minutes published by Maggie Burleson's office have an entire cons section listed under each one of the budget amendment items, K, L, and M, that was left entirely blank. Not a single con was listed by the city of Asheville for putting rifles in the hands of murderers. It is completely unacceptable for an institution like this to not recognize the harm that they're doing and to not acknowledge the slightest consequence of their actions. One of your council members even voted against these actions because they recognized the harm that they caused. I implore you to please do not pass this these meeting minutes until you acknowledge the harm that you've caused with your actions. On B, real quick, as you are performing your internal review of basic services and impacts on social, economic, and environmental justice between January and February this year for the next year's budget calendar, it's paramount that you include adequate and extensive discussion of the reparations resolution that you passed performatively in July 2020 and have yet to take any action on. You have a budget review coming up, make it count. And lastly, consent C. This is a $200,000 contract that you all have set up to have porta potties instead of the restrooms that our city already owns. That not only are they no safer, they still have the same amount of closed air as a normal bathroom would during COVID times than any of the normal bathrooms were. But in particular, they're in fact dirtier. So just clean the bathrooms you already have. Do not renew this $200,000 contract and use that $200,000 towards reparations. Thank you.
Council, we only had one speaker signed up to speak, and we have heard from that person. So we have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda, and I'm going to take the required roll call vote regarding the motion to approve the consent agenda. Vice Mayor Smith.
Yay.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Yay.
So you are voting in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yeah. Aye. Okay. Sorry. Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Okay. Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself? Aye. Okay, that is the consent agenda. We now have under presentations, one presentation this evening, and that is the manager's report from Ms. Campbell, and I will turn it over to her.
So good evening again, and thank you, Mayor and Council. And as the presentation is coming up this evening, I have the pleasure in terms of the manager's report of updating the community. I won't be doing it, but I will have staff to do it on two important efforts. First, I'm going to ask Jay Dundas. He is the director of our capital projects department to update you and the community on the status of various capital and infrastructure projects that are underway. And next, I will have David Melton, the director of our water resources department, to give us some information about the status and relief for non-payment shutoffs for utility bills. And so I'd like now to turn it over to Mr. Dundas.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell and Council. Appreciate it. Jay Dundas, Capital Projects Director. So 2020, obviously, we dealt with a lot of challenges, unexpected, but for us, it was a good year with regard to project progress, and some of that was because we weren't dealing with the normal challenges, and I know that the economy took a huge hit in 2020. One of the directives we were given early on was to try to do our best to try to maintain the contracting economy and keep contractors busy. And fortunately, as you'll see as I go through the list of projects here, that has been successful. That's on top of our normal challenges, which lists the resources. Essentially, is that we have a lot of work to do. Those of you that a budget cycle and stay connected with the city, you know that there's a lot on our schedules for being done, and there's a lot to be put on the schedules for the future. Project dollars don't go as far as they used to. There's a lot of internal and external factors that go into that, but we really are in demonstration of these projects making it go a long way. Have competing funds. We're dealing with that, but we'll see that we do make the best use of the resources we're given. Funding sources are limited, but in Asheville, we do an excellent job of looking at other sources of funding, the local, state, federal grants, all sources of funds that we pull in to accomplish what you'll see here in a minute. And then I just wanted to specify that we do have a lot of things coming up. We're refocusing our budget outlook, and really going to try to start concentrating on that 5 to 10 year window. Obviously, we'll be approving budgets in the 1 year time frame still, but we really want to give some longer term perspective on that, so we understand the context of long term budget development. So next slide, please. This is a little bit of a shout out. The staff that part of the group of staff that were at it, hard at work all through the year, are those that actually were on site to try to help with the management of these projects. These projects were completed by Public Works, Parks, Water, Capital Projects primarily, but the project development from planning, concepts, design, that's a city effort. Staff communication or communication to the public, it's all something that we work on as an organization, and we're all pulling in to try to make these projects successful. The types of projects that you'll see are new infrastructure maintenance. Take a second just to talk about emergency projects. It's not something we actually include a lot of discussion in our budgets, but they are very important that we have this reserve. We oftentimes, landslides, I think, is something that comes up routinely, every year and a half, we're having to deal with something like that. And so that's a very important part of the project, of our one important type of project that we deal with. Parks improvements, water, stormwater, vehicle and pedestrian vehicle safety, and then also regulatory requirements to push and the last project, the water project, was significantly pushed by the regulatory need to being able to accommodate large storms. So next slide, please. So this was Haywood Street. This was a great partnership, this effort. This is also, the fact that we didn't have, making the best of a bad situation. We didn't have the traffic downtown that we would normally. And so being able to set an aggressive schedule for this and actually being able to work to fulfill that was made possible by the fact that we didn't have the downtown traffic that we had. Now, it was obviously a huge hit to the economy, and we really look for the opportunity for that to grow back, but we were able to accomplish a lot. We also included Metropolitan Sewer District in this project. It was a great coordination effort. We actually were able to put new pavement down from storefront to storefront, and part of that, most of the asphalt that you see in this picture, and you can slide to the next picture as well, or the next slide. Most of the asphalt that you'll see in these photos is supported by the sewer project. We have utility agreements that allow us to do that. This started out as a sidewalk replacement. You see the brand new sidewalk. For those of you who remember, the bluestone that was down there was chipped. It was a tripping hazard. This is a smooth, uniform surface, and it's a great improvement. So next slide, please. River Arts District, 3 years plus in the making. You can see Polly McDaniel had the forethought to go up on the bridge and take a picture of it before and then after. In the small photo in the right hand lower hand side, you can see right dead in the middle of this picture is the kind of the landmark. That's 8 River Arts Place. And you can see that before it had a road running right in front of it. Now that Riverside Drive is realigned to the back of the building and a newly constructed one-way street that actually, I think it lends itself to being closed off for events and that sort of thing is now at River Arts Place is in front of that building. You also see dedicated bicycle infrastructure, multi-use paths, just a total transformation of 2.2 miles of this riverfront. Next slide. These are also some of the amenities in the River Arts District. You have these art pieces that are also there for people's leisure and relaxation. One of my favorite parts of this project is that the pavers, the cobblestone that you see there, is actually salvaged concrete. It was broken up sidewalks and various other things from the area, and they placed it in this area to make this patio type feeling. It was a really good use of the material. Next slide. And this is just a drone shot of the Smoky Park Supper Club on the lower right-hand side, and just represents the 2.2 miles of greenway that are in this project. We're not quite done with this. Like I said, this is hopefully a ribbon cutting because we can't get on site, but it's also just kind of a project update of things that are pretty close to being finished. Next slide. Part of the bond project was also greenway connectors. We have greenway connectors in our regular CIP as well, our general fund CIP. This was done in the area between the River Arts District and Southside neighborhood, connecting Ralph Street to Depot Street. There are future greenways planned for the area. So next slide. It's a good use of existing infrastructure. There was an old bridge that was not in use for a long time. It's very structurally sound. And we were able to reuse that bridge, redeck it, and put some safety rails up there. This picture on the right is looking up from Depot Street towards Ralph Street. This also has a accessible, ADA accessible path down to and to help with this connectivity in this neighborhood. Next slide. Reed Creek is another great greenway extension. The intent, I believe, of this project is to kind of connect the downtown River Arts District areas to parts to the north part of town, at UNCA campus specifically, and then the UNCA greenway that runs along that campus to Merriman. So it's a great pedestrian multi-use connectivity project. We built 2 blocks of greenway in conjunction with a neighboring property owner. They did a development and they extended for another block our project, and we were able to get some area cleared underneath the Chestnut overpass. And this photo, the larger photo, is taken from that perspective and looking north. So probably 600 to 800 feet of additional greenway for this area. Next slide. And then you can click over to the next slide too, and click through that. This is Grove's vision marker. It was a downtown project. You kind of get an idea of this was a previously in this location or something very similar. It was taken down for some repair, but also more for the development of the hotel on that corner. We were able to get it stood back up and repaired this summer. It was again, this is one of those things that it was limitedly disrupted because of the traffic downtown was less. The nighttime, the blue lighting is actually supplied by solar power at this point. I think previously it was on utility power, and we were able to upgrade that to a more sustainable long-term source of power. So it's a great feature for downtown, and real happy to have gotten that done. Next slide. This is an interesting project from a standpoint. It's a wonderful project. I started out with the slide presentation with the after photo of this, but this is great from a funding source standpoint, because this combines bond funding, general fund CIP, general fund operating budget, which I didn't include in here, to really make a huge improvement to an area that needed it. So what you see here is from right to left, you see an old baseball stadium, and you can really start, the fence is a low fence. The dugouts are painted concrete block. The light poles you'll see are old wooden poles. There's this beige press box behind the backstop. The courts are cracked and they're in need of some attention. And also and I forgot the walking path is there in the middle of it all. So if you click the next slide, you can really see the transformation of this area. So again, going right to left, you see a brand new backstop, brand new open dugouts. You can see pavement, new bleachers. The poles are now supporting energy efficient lighting. And this operating funds were used for this interactive play area for the recreational programs that have out there. The walking paths newly paved, and the courts are redone, providing more opportunity for people to play ball out there. We did reduce the court size, but there is opportunity for that expansion in the future. One thing I'd really like to mention is the fact that we can barely get these places built before people are actually out using them. It's an amazing thing. Obviously, it's safe, and the contractors wrote things off. But the walking paths in the River Art District, as soon as there was pavement down, people were using it. The bike paths the same way. Basketball courts, as we were doing progress meetings out here, people were using them. So people really appreciate and want these improvements in this infrastructure. So it's just an amazing thing to see. As you click through this, you can see the playground behind from this perspective. So the next slide. The playground and the workout facilities that were put in place, and then the next slide actually just shows a better perspective of the baseball field. The lighting, you got pedestrian scale lighting as well as the athletic scale lighting. Next slide. Richmond Hill didn't have the bathroom facilities. People would have used Richmond Hill for a lot of different reasons. A lot of events out there didn't have the bathroom facilities. This facility builds the bathrooms and also enhances the area with a picnic area, covered shelter. You can click to the next slide, just a different perspective of this. This project included pulling power and water in a good distance to accommodate the site, and so it's a great project as well. Next slide. The ARC Transit Station remodel. Again, this is used CIP funds, FTA funds, one of our normal regular federal funding partners, and PV installation. So if you click through this, it's just a complete remodel of the building, interior and exterior. You see new furniture, new accommodations inside, new office area. The platform has new static signage, which you can see in the ovals, the multicolored ovals on the pillars, and new dynamic, digital signage to help people understand, the users understand where the buses are and the routes and so on and so forth. So it's a good project. I was going to include PV, but the only picture I had was taken pre-rainstorm, I think, so it was pretty dark and didn't show much. But there is a new photo solar system on the building, and we're supplying. It's collecting and supplying power, which I believe is fed back to the grid for the most part. Next slide. Okay, this is one where I really wanted to make sure, again, I pointed out the emergency part of all the projects we talked about have had planning, years maybe of planning, budget deliberations, design efforts. Sometimes you just don't have that opportunity. And these landslides are certainly indicative of that. So if you click through the next photo, you'll just see over time, the tremendous effort that staff put together to respond to the emergency. Also, the idea of taking this from the same perspective is very helpful in putting this slide presentation together. It really is just a demonstration of what you had a landslide. There was immediate response. There was funding available. Staff got contractors put together. This compromised the ability for the road. There was only half a road or less than half a road there when the contractors arrive on site. And then less than a year later, right around a year, that you have a fully restored, stabilized, reinforced bank with a brand new road, curb system, and guardrails. So but again, it really focuses on some things we kind of don't often talk about, is that need for emergency funds as well. So next slide. Charlotte Street, it's a great project. It's again back kind of like the Elsie's Bridge, where we took old infrastructure and made it something incredible and new out of it. This was an old forward lane alignment, two lanes north, 2 lanes south. The sidewalk, if you were on the sidewalk with that old alignment, you were within inches a lot of times of traffic. And what we have, what has been done here is created a 3-lane alignment, two travel lanes, one north, one south, and a turn lane, and bicycle lanes on either side of the road, which actually puts you and separates the walking, the pedestrian traffic from the roads. So next slide. Resurfacing is definitely something we've had about 6 resurfacing contracts in the first 4 years of the bond. 3 of those have been through the general CIP, and 3 of those through the bond. There's some other roads that have been resurfaced as well. So this is our pavement is aging, and that is definitely something important for as we go forward. Next slide, please. Stormwater infrastructure has been completed. This is in conjunction. There's a lot of utility work done with paving work that was done in the Kenilworth area. We do have a lot of buried infrastructure. Unfortunately, buried infrastructure kind of presents itself when there's a backup or a failure. In this case, we were able to address those issues that knew existed in this culvert and replace them before there was major issues. Next slide. Roofs, we have a lot of buildings. They all need roofs. This was not my favorite picture because it still shows that this building needs a lot of attention. But the buildings, we have to keep them on a replacement cycle with regard to windows, doors, and roofs. And this is Shelburne Road, facility used by facility maintenance, public safety, and public works. And this was a $700,000 roof, just to give you some perspective. So definitely, but it was all done this year. Next slide. One of the things or 2 of the things identified in Geo Bond was bus shelters and traffic calming. We have been working on this and trying to check off the petitions. It's a petition process for traffic calming, and there's just a list of bus shelters. Locating these bus shelters can be the most complicated part of this. They're really kind of an easy build, so we're continuing to work on those. Next slide. North Fork Dam. This is a big project, very expensive, but it was necessary in order to meet, like I said, the requirements for being able to accommodate those big storms. This picture here shows the dam stabilization and reinforcing for seismic disturbances. This really hit home when we had an earthquake, and I felt it in my living room earlier in the fall. So this is part of that project. Next slide. It demonstrates how much effort it would take to keep the water supply going. This is a temporary accommodation that was made through the project. Next slide. A lot of work. The perspective here is the individual in the yellow shirt down at the bottom. Just get a perspective on how big this project is. And there's probably a very similar sized amount of concrete in the ground as above the ground here. So this is a major. This is an auxiliary spillway. And then to close the next slide. There is this is at night. This is a completed project, and so this kind of closes. So I think it was kind of appropriate to close on kind of turn the lights off on 2020 and turn the lights on 2022 or 2021 rather. To go to 2021, kind of look ahead. The next slide kind of gives you a list of projects. I'm not going to read through this, just to kind of get a feel for how much we have ahead of us. And so the next slide. We have, again, the takeaways, just a reminder that these are the things that we deal with, and you'll certainly understand that we're going to work within these challenges and try to make the best of all the project expectations that we have. I just wanted to kind of inform council that the public input is a part of the process. As soon as we open up something for public comment, there's a possibility that you'll start receiving emails on those. Construction, you'll see construction and design approvals coming to you in the near future, and then also in the spring CIP budget development. And the last slide is the resource that so the next slide, please. resource that we give everybody to kind of stay up to date with projects is we have a dashboard. It communicates a lot about the projects, who the project managers are, project contact information. This is real-time update on what we spent on projects. And so we're trying to keep this up to date and try to present these things as I'm doing tonight routinely. Once a year is maybe not enough because it takes a long time, but this is a resource for every day. So thank you all for your time and your support on getting these projects done.
And council, I know that we are taking up a lot of time this evening. It's more so than we normally do on the manager's report, but I think it's really, really important for us to communicate to the community that we're still in business. I mean, and basic infrastructure is the backbone of a community. And we just wanted to bring you all up to date on the numerous initiatives that we have underway and that we've completed and that we've got a long way to go.
Jade, can I just ask quickly? I hope I know the answer to this question, but are we on target to spend all the bond money within the legislated time so that we will be in compliance with the law and compliance with our bond commitment?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. That was 7 years. We have in November we met the 4-year mark. We have 3 years left, and so we are keeping a close eye on that. We've got some the complications with the state funding of some of those. We added state funding again using those resources. They had a funding stall, I guess, and so it looks like we're starting to see some of that trickle back. And so, but we're definitely on target to meet that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jade. And now we can transition to David Melton with Water Resources.
Good evening, I'm David Melton, the Director of Water Resources, and tonight I would like to provide an update on the status of relief for non-payment utility shutoffs. Talk about the compliance with the Governor's executive order and timeline of implementation, the extension of relief for non-payment utility shutoffs, and what our next steps will be. Next slide, please. The City of Asheville remains dedicated to ensuring that all water customers have access to clean drinking water and are able to practice good hygiene by washing their hands frequently. The city has followed Governor Ward Cooper's executive orders, but exercised more leniency. The city extended the executive order expiration timelines to facilitate communication with our customers. Next slide, please. On March 13th, 2020, in light of the pandemic, the City of Asheville suspended non-payment utility shutoffs. On March 31st, 2020, North Carolina Governor Executive Order 124 officially suspended utility non-payment shutoffs. On July 28th of 2020, North Carolina Governor's Executive Order regarding utility non-payment shutoffs expired. On August 18th, the city resumed utility non-payment shutoffs for customers that had entered arrears after that date. The city also took the proactive step to protect approximately 44,000 customer accounts that were delinquent between March 13th, 2020 and August 18th, 2020, in accordance with the governor's executive order. These accounts will remain protected until February 18th, 2020.
David, let's make sure it's 4,400 rather than 44,000. I think you said 44,000.
4,400.
Okay.
Next slide, please. All customers that were in arrears between March 13th, 2020 and mid-August 2020 have their accounts protected until Friday, February 18th, 2021, in accordance with the governor's executive orders. Public outreach through the city's Cape Department and Water Resources Customer Service Division continues to encourage customers in this protected group to take advantage of payment plans and other options to move their accounts out of arrears before February of 2021. Payment plans are a standard option offered by the city and are available to all customers. Next slide, please. Understanding the continuing economic hardships caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the City of Asheville is discontinuing non-payment shutoffs for utility bills that have become delinquent after August 18th, 2020 until February 18th, 2021. This includes from present day today all the way to February 18th, 2021. We're hopeful that this pause will give customers relief during the new mandated restrictions and will provide the opportunity to map out a pathway moving forward. We understand that many of our residents continue to experience economic fallout from the pandemic, and we look forward to helping everyone who has been financially challenged due to the pandemic to the extent possible. Next slide, please. Our next steps. Once the automatic 6-month extension expires on February 18th, all customers will be eligible to be cut. This will also apply to customers whose accounts became delinquent during the January to February pause and non-payment disconnects. After February 18th, we will reassess and determine if additional action or time is needed. Next slide, please. I'll be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
David, this is Gwen. We also collect for MSD customers. Have we been in contact with MSD, and I mean, are there any issues with MSD not being cooperative with this action, or have we gotten any pushback, I guess, from our partner agencies?
We haven't, and we're in constant contact with MSD, and they have been amenable to with all the suggestions that we've come up with. They're wonderful to work with.
I'd like to get some, David, I'd like to get some clarification. So those that water has already been shut off, are they turning their waters back on and they're protected through February 18th?
We have a cycle typically of shut off and turn back on, and a lot of those happen on the same day. We ran the numbers last week, and we had about 32 accounts that were still off for non-payment. We would have to go through and see if the residence was still occupied, because some of those is what we refer to as move-outs. People just move out and they're gone. So we would have to do the research and find out, but we could do that.
I want to thank staff for, this is Kim, for making the steps that we needed to take this pause, but I am still really concerned about what happens on February 18th. And that timeline is going to come up really soon. So I'm urging and imploring my fellow council members to lead this pathway forward and not to wait.
Thank you.
Well, the only thing that I would add is that the staff will be meeting and talking about how we, as you say, Kim, lead this pathway forward. We are looking at resources that might be available for us to, I think a council member said that essentially right now we're just kind of kicking the can down the road, and that we really, really need to address the debt that people are encumbering now. And so that's what we'll be working on over the next couple of weeks, is trying to figure out a funding source, not just to continue to extend extensions and delay shutoffs, because the debt will still remain. We want to undo the debt.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Campbell, are there any other, I know we don't have any other presenters under this. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Okay.
That's all that I have. Thank you all for your patience and your attention. Thanks.
Okay, council, we have a number of public hearings, and so we're going to go into those. The first is a public hearing. We have a number of road closures, so we're going to begin with those. The first is a public hearing to permanently close a portion of a right-of-way known as Velvet Street, and Streets Division Manager Chad Bandy is here to present this item.
Thank you, Mayor Manheimer. Members of council, thank you for letting me be here in front of you this afternoon. As the mayor said, we do have 3 of these, and of course, we'll go through these one at a time. The first closure that we have that you see in front of you right now is a proposal to close a portion of Velvet Street right-of-way. Just to orient everyone, as you see, Beaumont Street as it comes, Charlotte Street would be to the right off the screen. It comes up the hill to Market or South Market. The building you see there is the new 55 South Market housing, and Velvet Street goes to the top right. The right-of-way known as Velvet Street goes to the top right of the map. During construction, the 55 South Market did have to construct a stairway out to the public sidewalk for fire safety needs. In doing this, they did need to encroach into the right-of-way, and so what has been proposed over time is the closure of this triangle portion of right-of-way that you see in front of you. One thing to keep in mind, this will not cut off access from Eagle to Beaumont via Velvet Street. That will remain. If at any portion or any time a portion of the real property to the right needs to be accessed for that full right-of-way width, that property is city-owned property. That's the property that the Public Works building currently sits on. The Public Works building is just off the screen to the right also. But this was taken in front of the Multimodal Commission on October 28th. That was passed unanimously. And at this time, I would be happy to answer any questions about this closure, and also ask for a resolution to close this right-of-way permanently.
Council, do you have any questions of Chad before we open the public comment? We do have one person signed up to speak under this item. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions. So staff, if you've got our caller on the line, please proceed.
Mayor, the one caller is not on the line. Okay, then I will close the public hearing. Do I have a motion to approve public hearing item A? I'm sorry, it is not Revolution Day. Do I have a motion and a second to recess the public hearing to permanently close a portion of a right-of-way known as Velvet Street until January 26, 2021?
So
Thank you, Sandra. To be clear, we could not vote tonight on the actual item itself. We can only vote to recess this item until our next meeting when we will actually vote on it. And Councilwoman Kilgore made a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Mayor, I have a question. This is Kim. In a situation like this,
Who seconded that? That's the only thing I couldn't. As long as Maggie knows who seconded it.
Was it Councilwoman Turner?
Yes, it was. Okay. Yes. All right. Please, yes. Question.
so my question is, when we have a situation like this where the caller is not in the queue, can we either switch the items to see if it's a technical issue, or do we have another opportunity for that person to call in since we're not voting till the next meeting?
And now, one way to do it, staff could call. Staff, do you feel like you could call? I've got her name, Abby.
Mayor, we have texted her and sent her an email well before her time was up.
Okay, so you have reached out to her.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, and also, isn't one of the ideas of moving these public hearings is we also they have this next 2 weeks to reach out to us and to reach out to Maggie to give us.
I think it's 24 hours, right?
Oh, right.
Yes,
I mean, there's
yes,
serious,
That's correct. If I may just cut in and explain that, the current law under the remote meetings format allows for 24 hours for anyone to add additional comments via email to these public hearings. So we would encourage this or anyone else in the community wishing to comment on these public hearings and any of the other public hearings we have throughout this process. You do have 24 hours following the close of the public hearing to be able to comment, and all of those are included in the record. Will be provided to City Council for consideration.
Thank you for clarifying.
And I also understand that staff tried to call her as well. So thank you, staff, for trying to reach all of our folks that signed up. All right, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to proceed with a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Okay, our next is a public hearing to permanently close a portion of right-of-way at the intersection of Courtland and Houston. And again, Mr. Bandy is going to present this item.
Right, thank you, Mayor. Ashley, if we can, thank you. You beat me to it. What you see in front of you is at the intersection of Courtland Avenue and Houston Street. And this is a petition to close a portion of excess right-of-way at this intersection. The petitioners were Youngblood and Sarah Hask. So during the review by staff, one thing that was requested and agreed upon by the Hask was the retention of an 11.5-foot easement. That easement would be for future water, stormwater, and sidewalk work that may occur in this area. As I said, the Hask agreed to that. This was taken in front of the Multimodal Commission on October 28th as well and was unanimously supported. This particular right-of-way completely abuts the Hask's property, so there is no other additional property owners adjoining this petition because of that. The closure will not adversely affect the operation and use of this intersection. It will actually reduce the amount of right-of-way that is in that area and reduce the amount that city staff would be responsible for any maintenance of. At this point, staff is supportive of the request of the petition and would request a resolution from council to close this right-of-way.
Council, do you have any questions before we open the public comment? We do have some signups for public comment. 2 of the 3 are actually the applicants, but any questions? Okay, staff, if we have any callers on the line, please proceed.
Mayor, the third person is not on the line, but I believe Youngblood and Sarah are in the call currently. If you would like to say anything now, you can.
Hi. So I guess Chad has mentioned most of what I said, but I just want to thank council and the mayor for hearing our request. And I bought this property on Houston Street in 2003, and since then it's been my only residence. The property consists of these 3 lots. The house and driveway straddles 2 of them, and a third adjacent lot stands alone. It serves as our yard now, but it's detachable and buildable. And when most folks look at our house and yard, they assume that the property line comes up to the curb like it does with most homes. But people who have seen our survey are surprised to learn that the city owns a large portion of the yard. The city right-of-way basically cuts off the corner where Houston Street and Courtland Avenue meet, leaving an unequal distance from the curb to our property line. I think that someone from the city suggested that was from when the creation of I-240 back in the 70s, where the city had to rearrange some streets to accommodate the new highway and took more than they needed. The right-of-way closure we're requesting will put the property line at a consistent 5 feet from the curb at all points along the property line. This allows us more flexibility when we eventually build on this lot, making it easier to meet the city setback requirements. This also serves the public interest because we will continue to maintain the area as usual, and the city will be relieved of this responsibility. The city should also get a slight boost in tax revenue as their property will gain about 1,600 square feet. Another important issue about this right-of-way closure is that no other property owners will be affected in any way. Most of these closures involve a street or alley between multiple property owners, but this request is entirely between us and the city. As Chad said earlier, no boundaries between adjacent property owners will be changed at all. No ingress or egress of other property owners will be affected in any way. Our request started because of a dispute with our neighbor, Mr. Jaska. Before he moved in, we mowed the grass and maintained the split rail fence, which had been there before we moved in, and planted flowers as we pleased without worrying about the property line. When he purchased the house on the other side of the lot, there were some encroachment issues on both our parts, and we traded surveys and discussed a possible land swap to address them. When we couldn't come to an agreement, he became unhinged. From seeing our survey, he learned that a large section of our yard was in the public right-of-way. He began to use this area to harass and torment my wife and I. But the point is, the police had to be dispatched on many occasions because of his actions. And he has a criminal case pending for one of those, but in most cases, the police say they can't make him leave if he remains on the public right-of-way. If the city grants our request, we'll be able to have control of our yard without fear of harassment and intimidation. There'll be a clear distinction between public and private property, and any violations will be easier to deal with. There will be little or no need for calls to the police or public works or animal control and the like. And it'll help keep the peace in our neighborhood. Thank you so much.
Great, staff, do we have anyone else on the line to speak on this? There was one other caller who I guess didn't join us, or one other person who signed up to speak.
No, Mayor, that caller is not on the line.
Okay. All right, council, we will need a motion on this one as well, and that will be a motion to recess the public hearing to permanently close a portion of right-of-way at the intersection of Courtland and Houston until January 26, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I'll move. This is Sage.
Okay, Maggie, that was Councilwoman Turner. Do I have a second?
This is Gwen, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? Okay. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself. Aye. Next is public hearing item C. This is a public hearing to permanently close an unopened right-of-way known as Trey Street. And again, we'll hear from Mr. Bandy regarding this item.
Thank you, Mayor. The third and final, as you mentioned, is an unopened right-of-way known as Trade Street. This particular closure, I apologize in advance if I mispronounced the name, but was initiated by Minch Construction. This petition was also joined by Benjamin Butler, who is an adjoining property owner. If this right-of-way closure is approved, the property would split 50-50 down the center line of the project, or of the right-of-way. This particular closure also went in front of Multimodal Commission on October 28th and was fully supported. Staff is also supportive of this closure, and at this time I would also ask for a resolution in support of this closure.
All right, council, everybody make sure you're on mute if you're not talking. We do have one person signed up to speak on this matter, but before we do that, are there any questions of any of you of Mr. Bandy? Okay, staff, do we have our one caller on the line?
Council, this caller is also not on the line.
Okay. We will close the public hearing and I will need a motion once again. I need a motion and a second to recess the public hearing to permanently close an unopened right-of-way known as Trade Street until January 26, 2021.
So moved. This is Antoinette.
Second.
I'm sorry, I did not get those motions, please.
It was Mosley and Kilgore.
Okay, got it. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'll take a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Okay, the next public hearing item. Wait, did somebody say something? No? Okay. The next public hearing item is item D. This item needs to be continued. Do I have a motion and a second to continue the public hearing to March 23rd, 2021 to consider an amendment to Articles 2 and 16 of the Unified Development Ordinance to update definitions and regulations related to homestays?
This is Gwen. I'll make that motion.
Okay.
This is Sage. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And I'll do a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Okay, next is a public hearing to consider the conditional zoning of 32.2 acres of property located at 99999 Sand Hill Road from Commercial Industrial District to Commercial Expansion Conditional Zone for an approximately 130,000 square foot warehouse and distribution facility and surface parking and vehicle storage areas, along with a change in the future land use map from urban center to employment/anchor institution center. And Shannon Tuck is going to make this presentation, but I did have a question for council as a preliminary matter, not to be the one to throw a wrench into things, but we do not have a traffic study on this item yet. It is going to be required. We can proceed with the public hearing without the traffic study. That is technically fine per our city attorney. However, I just wanted to inquire whether anybody felt we should continue this item to the next meeting in order to give time to receive that traffic study or not. Now, I will say the applicant will be required to address any concerns that result from the traffic study, and it seems pretty apparent that this project will not impact city roads but we don't know. We don't have traffic study yet, but it is at Sand Hill and Smoky Park, which are both state roads. But so I just wanted to ask that question, if you were comfortable with proceeding or if there was any concern about that and preferred to continue it. Yes, Sage.
Gwen, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. So I think Sage and I were bringing this up. I think I'm okay with going ahead, given the fact that we have conditions that would require that they address any concerns. But I would ask that even though it's not going to be a public hearing the next go round, if someone, whether it's the transportation department or the legal department, if they could update us on what the issues were, if any, that were raised by the traffic study and what has been agreed, the mitigating, the mitigation that the project will do. Because, I mean, whether it's state roads or city roads, I think it would be good for council to know what the traffic impact and what mitigation, if any. So, rather than we sort of perfunctory usually go through the approval at the following meeting, if we could just put that and make sure we address that and hear that. And to the extent that we know beforehand, if we could share that with council so that we can think about it before our vote. That's all I ask.
My comment would be that I think I am wary of us reviewing a project without a complete application in general. I think because of the changed rules due to COVID, where we have a 2-week delay for an actual vote, that in this case, it might be all right. But considering the large vehicle numbers that I see in this presentation, I think that this is an important study, and I do not want us to get in the habit of reviewing projects for conditional approval without a full, complete application. So I'm okay with proceeding, but I want to throw caution that the public may not have adequate time to give feedback on what I believe were 696 vans and some other large number of parking cars. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else on council who has any concerns about proceeding with the public hearing portion tonight? Are we okay to proceed?
I'm okay.
Okay. Everybody else like this kind of a thing? Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna hear from Shannon Tuck, our city planner.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. To begin, is this microphone, does that help? Okay. So to begin, I'd like to orient everybody to the site. So we look at the Exhibit A zoning map, and the property that is outlined and hatched in red is the subject property. Now, this is the entire parcel, the 45-acre parcel, and the subject of this rezoning and the project site is somewhat less than this. It's about 32 acres, so it's only a portion of the site. And this site is located on the very edge of the city's jurisdiction, near the intersection of Smoky Park Highway and Sand Hill Road, for those who may be familiar with that intersection. It's in the Inca Candler area. The property is currently zoned commercial industrial conditional zone, which is the result of a 2010 rezoning for a very large retail master plan, a retail village kind of master plan. And that project never moved forward, and the master plan for that has essentially expired. So should this rezoning be approved, it will supplant the former commercial industrial zoning and with the proposed commercial expansion zoning. So even though this project is for a large retail, or excuse me, a large warehouse and distribution facility, it is basically a commercial industrial type use. However, under the city's current rules, a project that is over 100,000 square feet in size must choose one of the city's expansion zoning districts. So the commercial expansion is the most appropriate designation for this particular kind of project. That was not the case in 2010 when the former project came through, which is why it has a different zoning designation. If it were the same, we could just amend the master plan or do a new master plan for the same zoning designation. Next slide, please. So looking at the Exhibit B aerial map, you get a better sense of the industrial nature of the property. The property has been cleaned up, it's been graded. It was a former brownfield site that has experienced some mitigation. So the site is pretty bare as it is today. The one remaining feature on the property is the historic clock tower, which you see there sort of in the center of the site. And the current applicant has committed to preserving and protecting that clock tower. And that is represented in both the site plans that were included in the packet, as well as the B1 conditions associated with the project. I'll also point out that is Smoky Park Highway on the north side of the property. That is the main corridor that will be used to access the property. You also see Hominy Creek along the northern and western boundaries. There's actually a thin parcel that sort of separates the subject property from Hominy Creek. So the creek is actually off-site. So this particular project is not impacted in any way by stream buffers or floodplains or anything of that nature. Next slide. So should this rezoning request be supported, it would also necessitate a change to the future land use map. Currently, the property, if you were to look at the map today, the property is designated urban center. And you can see the blue urban center designation that kind of wraps around this property. It's a very odd kind of shape, and that is in part because the area that had been approved with that 2000 plan included property that was both in the city's jurisdiction as well as the former ETJ. So when the ETJ was removed from the city's jurisdiction, it kind of created some odd zoning lines and land use designation lines. So the proposal, if supported, would change the zoning designation from that blue urban center to the purple employment anchor institution, which is a more appropriate designation for the proposed use. It's also a very compatible designation with both the employment anchor institution across the creek at the AB Tech property, as well as the industrial manufacturing property to the south, the commercial property across Smoky Park Highway, as well as the light industrial uses and employment zoning designation that's in the county's jurisdiction to the east. Next slide, please. So kind of getting into the details of the project, this is the proposed site plan. It might look a little bit different than what was included in your packets, primarily because I've reoriented it to have a north-south orientation. So that's why the text is kind of reading sideways. But I thought it would be helpful to look at it in this orientation since all of the other maps and references are in the same orientation. So to reiterate, the project area is about 32 acres. It does include a single warehouse and distribution building. It's a one-story building. It's a tall one-story building at 48 feet and just under 130,000 square feet. Associated with the project are two large surface parking areas. There's an employee parking lot that is just on the north side of the building. That's the smaller of the two parking areas. And then the larger 696 space van storage area. So the van area is striped and sort of designed and laid out like a parking lot, but it actually serves as both, I suppose you could call it a parking lot, but it's also what we refer to as outdoor storage. So it's going to basically store those vehicles in a secure place. Some of the other site features for the project include the landscaping that often comes with commercial projects. In this particular case, that's parking lot and building impact landscaping. Due to the size of those parking lots and the amount of roof on the one-story building, there's a fair amount of impervious surfaces, about 21.3 acres. That is proposed to be offset or mitigated to some degree by the bioretention cells that are included in the van storage area. Those are the large, kind of wide landscaped islands. They look like landscaped islands on your plans. Those are actually designed to be bioretention cells, so stormwater will flow and be captured in those cells, and it will treat that water before releasing it back into the ground. We combine that also with the 2.3 acre more traditional surface pond that is located on the north side of that parking area. That is off-site. It will serve this development, but also potentially serve other future development. So it's larger, it's probably larger than it needs to be for this particular project. Also included in the project are sidewalks throughout the site, all the way from the western end, all the way up to the building. And those sidewalks range in size between 4 and 12 feet wide. Generally speaking, the further away from the main doors of the building are the narrower sidewalks. And as those sidewalk and travel paths converge, the sidewalks widen as you get closer and closer to the building. So they go from 4 feet to 6 feet to 8 feet to 12 feet, et cetera. We also have 10-foot wide sidewalks along the main entry road. This project is also the first project that the council has seen that includes the tree preservation canopy standard. This site will comply with that standard. The overall requirement for this project is 20%. The council may recall there's different ways of satisfying that requirement. And in this case, the applicant is proposing to reforest approximately 10% of the site. You may recall from that earlier image, the aerial image, there's very little vegetation on the site now. So this will be a good improvement to the project. That combined with the parking lot landscaping and building impact landscaping will help improve the tree canopy conditions. Additionally, as I mentioned, the overall requirement is 20%, so the applicant will reforest about 10% and pay a fee for the remaining 10%. Given the size of this property, the conditions of the property, the fact that there's very little canopy on the site already, that results in a fairly significant fee. So that money will be put into the designated fund to be used for canopy improvements elsewhere in the city.
Shannon, can you estimate the amount of the fee that you think it'll result in?
Based on the most recent numbers provided by the applicant, the fee is in the neighborhood of $570,000, somewhere in that range. The project will also meet the open space requirements. The open space areas will overlap with both the tree canopy and the proposed greenway. We also have the preserved historic clock tower on the site. It's a little bit hard to see on the site plan. It's kind of tucked in that northeast corner of the van parking area. And that will be preserved and protected moving forward. The greenway easements shown along the western boundary of the property, that is both a permanent easement as well as construction easement to be coordinated with Buncombe County, who is designing and constructing the Inca Heritage Greenway through that area. And it will connect this site to other notable properties around in this general vicinity. We also have new road construction that will come from the newly constructed bridge on Smoky Park Highway. This site will be accessed via that new road coming off the bridge. It comes into the cul-de-sac that you see in the northeast corner of the site. And then the traffic is split in two directions. One, the vans and the employee parking, it takes one route, and the other separates the truck traffic for loading and disembarking. We also have bike lanes into the subject property for multimodal connections. Next slide, please. We snuck in this context map so you can kind of get a sense of how this property sits. You see the industrial manufacturing property just to the south. I think it's called the Bonaire plant today. I have always thought of it as the former BASF or Colbond. It's on the same property, for those of you who may be familiar with that former industrial use. And then you can see that the subject property is sort of in the middle there, and that connection off of that cul-de-sac up to Smoky Park Highway across Hominy Creek. And then you see there's other connections to other light industrial uses, allowing for some traffic should it be necessary to be routed out to Sand Hill Road. But we do expect 80% or the majority of the traffic to enter and exit from Smoky Park Highway. Next slide. The commercial expansion district also requires a few building design features, including a 40% fenestration along the ground level. And you can see from the upper elevation, even though the commercial expansion district is really contemplating probably a mixed-use project or something that's more heavy retail in a more urban setting and condition. So it's really meant, that fenestration requirement is really meant to enhance the pedestrian environment, kind of giving passersby the opportunity to kind of peek in shop windows and have access into different storefronts. This is really not that kind of condition. Nevertheless, that ground level facade along the primary, what we are calling the primary facade, it does meet the 40% requirement, so that's good. The other requirement is operable pedestrian entrances every 75 feet along the facade. We do not meet that requirement. The three entrances that you can see on that upper elevation are within 75 feet of each other, but then there's a larger expanse beyond that last door that it exceeds 75 feet. But again, this isn't really the context where we're seeking to have those operable pedestrian entrances. And that is included as a modification with this project. And then you can see a couple of the other elevations for the project. I didn't include the fourth one, which is essentially a blank wall, but it gives you a sense of what we're looking at with this building or what we can expect. Next slide, please. So as the council is aware, all conditional zonings come with a list of required conditions. Most of those conditions tend to just sort of describe the project and highlight some of the features of the project. There are a couple associated with this project that are worth noting. First, as I already mentioned, the historic clock tower will be preserved and protected. Also, the greenway easements for the Inca Heritage Trail are being accommodated by the applicant and will cross the property. Next slide. Some of the general conditions, I went over most of these when I just walked through the site plan, so I won't go over them again. But one thing to note, and was mentioned earlier, is that a traffic impact study or assessment is required. My understanding is that has been done and has been completed and submitted to the NCDOT. We just haven't heard from the NCDOT what the results or what any recommendations of that may be. So we're just still waiting for some of that information. We have, however, reflected in the B1 conditions, that's condition number 4, that any recommendations that come out of that DOT review and approval will be, implemented by the applicant. And those would likely be, if there were any improvements, it would likely be off-site. It wouldn't affect the site plan. It would more than likely affect the roads around the project area. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we do like to highlight any conditions that identify modifications or exemptions from any of the standard development requirements. I mentioned earlier the sidewalk widths varying from 4 to 12 feet. The requirement in the commercial expansion district is for 10-foot wide sidewalks, but given the nature of this project, having those narrower sidewalks further away from the building seems reasonable, and they have provided a good network of pathways leading to the building. The tree island widths, the city requires a minimum width of 10 feet for the tree islands and a minimum planting area for each tree per tree. The project satisfies the planting area. It's just the width of the islands that are a little bit narrower than what we normally require, which is 10 feet. So they're proposing 9 instead of 10. The spacing of the pedestrian entrances along the primary facade that I went over with the building elevations. And then lastly, they are asking for some consideration for a slightly more intense lighting fixture for their parking lots. All of the cities, well, not all of the city, but any LED post-mounted fixture has what we call a bug rating or a BUG rating. It stands for backlight, light, and glare. And the requirement for this project, or for most commercial projects of this nature, is a backlight rating of 3, an uplight rating of 0, and a glare rating of, I believe, 2. So the fixtures that are being proposed would comply with the uplight and the glare rating, and they're just asking for a little bit more for the backlight rating. And my understanding is that is to allow for a 360 distribution of light. So it allows for kind of a broader distribution, which can, when well designed, can actually result in more even lighting distribution at the ground, as well as fewer fixtures. So that is often why applicants want brighter lights, is to have fewer fixtures. And that concludes my introduction, and the staff, we, as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission, do recommend approval of the project and have found that it does meet a number of the goals outlined in the city's comprehensive plan. And I'd be happy to answer any question or go into any more detail. The applicant is online and I think would like to address council as well.
Mayor.
Do we want to hear from the applicant first, or?
Well, this question that I have probably is more of a Shannon question.
Okay.
Can you clarify for me, it's not currently zoned urban center.
That's correct.
It's
Zone-
currently
Commercial, industrial,
Right.
conditional zone, yes.
Can you give me a little bit of insight of why this would have been identified as a future urban center? I mean, given the location where it's kind of surrounded completely, I mean, there's no, there doesn't look to be much, if any, residential anywhere near it, frankly.
Yeah.
Except that there is an Ingalls pretty close by, so that could be good.
I
mean, it's like, are we missing an opportunity here? And like, I realize that they probably can do this, but what's the staff's thinking about kind of giving away urban center zoning? Not giving it away, I don't mean that, but giving the future urban center away.
So I can tell you that the land use designation was heavily influenced by the former 2010 retail village plan that had been approved. So because when we were looking at what should the designations be, because that was not so long ago approved and there was still some life thinking that it may actually get built, we chose a designation that would most be compatible with that approved plan. But understanding now that that plan isn't moving forward, it's questionably appropriate. Particularly given, I think had that plan not been in place, it likely would have been designated employment anchor. And given the AB Tech property, the industrial property to the south and to the east, as well as the commercial properties across in Smoky Park, that probably would have been a more appropriate designation.
Thank you, Shannon.
And Shannon, this is Kim. Can you confirm what the projected annual property tax would be for a project like this?
For a project like this, based on you can kind of estimate the potential property tax based on the construction or the initial investment, the construction costs. So this project would be about a $30 million project. That would generate about $130,000 in property tax. So that would more than offset the city's service needs, or it should easily offset the city's service needs to this property.
This is Sage. I had a follow-up to Glenn's concern. I do believe just across, this is on the edge of the city's property, and just across the street at the Ingalls, and I believe there is a significantly large residential project proposed for behind that Ingalls that was recently in the media. So there is housing in this area. And I want to question if we actually receive the entire property tax. I believe there's a deal or a discount at the state level for a brownfields project. So we may need to look into that.
Yeah, I hadn't taken into account the reductions based on brownfields. And there is definitely significant residential in the area. In addition to the projects Councilman Turner mentioned, we do have Anka Village, the whole Biltmore Lake community, which includes multifamily as well as single family. So I'm not trying to suggest that there isn't. But of course, urban center isn't just about residential. It really promotes more of a mixed use, which just accommodates residential. So that wouldn't be the only thing we're looking for in this area. So employment opportunities are also welcome.
Shannon, would you say that is the difference here, though? So this use or this project could exist in an urban center planning, but what would have been different is that it would have triggered a requirement for more of a mixed use and a housing component, right?
Well, again, what triggers the uses or what the development requirements are would be the actual zoning. And the zoning on this property was commercial industrial before the 2010, and then the 2010 retail plan zoned it to commercial industrial conditional zone. So the designation really is just, the land use designation is just trying to give a sense of where we want this property or where we anticipate these properties to move towards in the future. It's not meant to, provide a very specific formula for what any potential development proposals may be.
Any other questions before we hear from the applicant? Okay.
Madam Mayor, are you ready for me? Great. Well,
Yes, I'm ready, sir.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to hear from us, review our project, and consider our requests. Certainly our request is for a zoning that would be appropriate to accommodate the project. As has been shown, let me first compliment your city staff and Shannon and her team for all that they have done to guide us. They have been great from a group that is not local to Asheville, coming from out of town. They have provided us with excellent guidance and recommendations, and we appreciate their hard work and support on our project. You guys have a great city staff and Shannon and her team, so we appreciate that. Some additional numbers that I can share with you and information about our project that we think are important, specific to this request, are certainly we are pursuing an entitlement, a land entitlement, a zoning designation from you. And should we get that, there would be a potential occupant that would then have the opportunity to locate in this particular project. We're under a confidentiality agreement as we serve that particular customer, but I can share some things with you related to that potential use, should you guys be willing to accept our application here. Jobs that would be associated with this facility they range in scale from 115 full-time employees would be expected to be employed there. 50 part-time employees would be expected to be employed in that facility, and 190 service delivery drivers or independent contractors would be expected to be employed there. So that's a total of 355 jobs in different capacities, as we've discussed. And for a wage, the proposed occupant or operator of that facility has an industry-leading starting wage of $15 an hour. And that is an industry-leading age for a distribution type of use, industrial use. And for the full-time employees, they would receive full benefits on the first day of employment. Those benefits would include medical, dental, and vision. So a $15 an hour starting wage plus benefits for those full-time employees. Also, I'd like to share with you some information that is particular to the project and specific to the design that may not be easily seen with the plans that Shannon displayed. She mentioned that it's a brownfield site. You guys are likely way more familiar with it than I am, but the Inca plant that was there was put into the brownfields program on a state level years ago. And so we are complying with that brownfields program. The site was historically contaminated. Those facts are known and it's public information. And so we have a work plan to be able to accommodate our proposed project, as you've seen, into DEQ for approval in accordance with that brownfields agreement. That involves creating, developing, and constructing this site to protect against future environmental issues, as well as allowing the site to move forward from its past environmental contamination. And so we think that's important. Specific scopes of work that are included at the moment in our project plan include vapor mitigation systems and vapor barriers to protect that building and that development in the future. In addition, something that's not clearly shown on our plan but is included in our project is in the vehicle storage area, or the large parking area. In addition to the bioretention cells and the landscaping islands and the trees, we have installed and included in our plan electrical conduit for electrical lines underneath that entire outdoor storage area to allow there to be a charging station at each one of those van parking spaces. So in the future, as the electric vehicles are manufactured and available, the expectation is for that entire fleet of delivery service vehicles to be electric and to be able to be plugged in there efficiently. And we're investing roughly $3.5 million now on that electrical conduit and work underneath that paved area to be able to accommodate those electric vehicles as they become available to us. And then as part of the project on the construction side, the physical work side, for us to create it, we'll follow construction pollution prevention plans on site. That includes erosion control and stormwater, both quantity and quality retention there on site, which you've shown in the on the site plan with the biocells, as well as that large stormwater retention facility that Shannon indicated. And we also will accommodate recycled content and include recycled content both in our concrete and steel for that particular building. In addition, you guys have heard it, I don't need to restate it, but the commitment to accommodating the Greenway and its plans as it follows Hominy Creek in and around the property, sort of on the western and northern sides. We're happy to do that, glad to do that. That's important to us. Preserving a clock tower. Also, we heard that feedback early on from the community. Glad to be able to adjust our plan to accommodate that. And then I think we've heard from Shannon and as well as some of the members of council on the reforestation. I think we were early or one of the first projects to go through your new reforestation ordinance. And you've heard from Shannon that 10% of trees we're glad to replant those on a site that I think doesn't really have any trees at the moment. If it does, it only has a few. And so we're glad to replant 10% of that, as well as really focus some of our contributions financially towards the tree preservation fee in lieu that's in excess of $500,000. So we're happy to do that. We think that's important. We share in wanting to replace that tree canopy that was lost long before our project was here. And so lastly, just let me address the traffic, as I know you guys have expressed concerns over our traffic study. We have done the traffic study. It is completed. We had it done 3 weeks ago, working to try to get it to you and get it to staff to review. It was submitted to NCDOT for review. NCDOT has committed to us that they will respond to that draft traffic study by January the 19th. And so we do expect to be able to provide feedback, as was requested earlier, at your next meeting based on those traffic studies as it comes out of review from NCDOT. But we wanted to make the commitment up front and did so in our conditions that any recommendations coming out of that traffic study we would address, we would incorporate into our plan to try to build trust and confidence on our ability to handle those traffic improvements based on what NCDOT's recommendations would be. So again, we appreciate you guys considering our project. Thank you for the opportunity to share and speak, and I would be happy to answer any or all questions that you have.
Council, do you have any questions for the applicant before we open the public hearing? Okay, all right, we're gonna open the public hearing. We do have a few people signed up to speak under this item. So staff, if you have any callers, please proceed.
Council, our first caller is Lewis Skelton. Lewis, your line is now open.
Good afternoon, members of the City Council. My name is Lewis Skelton. I'm a former resident of 2 Pine Avenue, Inca Village. I'm in support of the resolution for public hearing item E, conditional zoning request for 99,999 Sand Hill Road 82. I do wish to express my personal appreciation for the Samet Corporation and their tenant for the commitment to the Inca community for the preservation of the historic Inca Tower. The identity of the community for nearly a century of family history will be remembered and honored for years to come as a result of their willingness to become an active member in the living history of the Inca community. My father worked for American Inca for 2 decades. I graduated from Inca High School and lived in Inca Village in my formative years. I'm grateful to see that Inca will move into the future with vision icon of its legacy. I've served on historic preservation commissions for over 30 years and have reviewed over 100 National Register nominations, including 4 large historic districts, while directing the passage of an historic preservation ordinance for the County of Los Angeles. I recommend that the City Council direct the Historic Resources Commission to assist in the successful resource review to approve an historic landscape listing on the Department of Interior National Register of Historic Places under criterias A, B, C, and D, and provide for an historic marker at an appropriate location. Criteria A is that the site is associated with the events significant to broad patterns of our American history. The American history investment in 1928 was to avoid the protectionism trade tariffs of the 1920s. The result was to provide leadership in leading the region out of the Great Depression. Raw materials were brought in from the pulp forest of 5 states, the coal for energy came from Kentucky and West Virginia, and the Southern Railroad was saved from bankruptcy from the revenues for transport of raw materials. Criteria B is that the site is associated with persons significant in history. The rayon produced was synonymous with fashion designers Maurice Rittner, Legume, and Bill Blass. The architects for the various projects included I.M. Pei, architect of the World Trade Center, Pyramid of the Louvre in Paris, and the Rock and Roll Museum in Ohio. The expansion offices were designed by the firm of 6 associates, founded by Tony Lord, the first registered architect in North Carolina. The landscape architect was Harold Brown Schwoop, chief engineer of the Biltmore Forest, and the landscape architect of the Great Smokies National Park. Criteria C is that the site embodies a distinctive style of architecture and type of construction. American Inca was a planned community based on the English Garden City movement of a factory town and natural environment for recreation of employees. The clock tower was integral to the identity of the community, created for the factory, and provided the foundation of an historic landscape of a company housing, commercial buildings, bus stops, churches, wooded trails along the Inca Lake, and club for employees. The factory included gyms, bowling alleys, and sport athletic leagues for the employees. Criteria D is that the site has yielded information important to prehistory. The Hominy Creek riverbanks have been a source of river reed for the Cherokee tribe from prehistory to current times. The tribe signed a peace treaty not allowing access to Inca property to preserve culture. Thank you for the
Council, our next caller is Doug Hadaway.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. I am Doug Hadaway. My address is 21 Captain's Drive. I'm a City of Asheville resident and also a Oakland County resident. I am calling and speaking on behalf of Connect Inca. It's a local, energetic, civic organization that's dedicated towards the betterment of the Inca community area through greenways and trails and safe routes to school. Our interest in this project is specific to the Inca clock tower, and the Inca Heritage Trail. The existing conditional zoning already protects the clock tower and furthers the Inca Heritage Trail, even obligating the owner/developer to construct a portion of the Inca Heritage Trail. We learned the plans to demolish the tower and the uncertainty of whether this project would further the Inca Heritage Trail, which, by the way, is a project that Ms. Tuck mentioned earlier that is county-led and fully funded for approximately the 2 miles from the Sandhill Road crossing to the Sandhill Road crossing of Hominy Creek. And they're eager to proceed with their design work. We learned of these plans through social media, and we mobilized our board and an army of local citizens to get a petition executed. In less than 2 weeks' time, we had over 4,000 signatures expressing their interest to protect the Inca Clock Tower and further the Inca Heritage Trail. These were shared with you, Ms. Mayor, and others, Planning and Zoning Chair, County Chairperson, and other individuals, including the owner and developer, expressing our interest for that. We appreciate Mr. Hall and Samet's response to that by committing to preserve the Inca Clock Tower and to further the Inca Heritage Trail through the property. And we did send a letter including that. We're happy to see these conditions also included in the B1 exhibit of the agreement. The Inca Clock Tower is very clear and specific about its preservation. The language regarding the greenway is a little looser and gives away a little bit from the existing zoning in place. We're hopeful that indeed the commitment is there to follow through with providing the easement to provide for the publicly accessible trail. the Enka Village concept that this current zoning had, it was an idea 10 years ago, and a lot has changed on this property. And we're basically just trying to make sure that these two public interests are furthered, this clock tower and the trail, with this development. Thank you for Samet and staff and your commitment as a council to these public interests. We encourage you to continue working with the county and in seeing to its realization. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Ryan Reagan.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. My name is Ryan Regan, and I live in West Asheville. I am Director of Business Development for the Economic Development Coalition of Asheville-Buncombe County. As you know, the EDC of Asheville-Buncombe County represents the enduring 26-year partnership of the Asheville City Council, the Buncombe County Board of Commissioners, and the Asheville Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm offering comment this evening in support of the proposed development in Inca Commerce Park being led by the Samet Corporation. As background, for over a decade, an array of local, regional, and state partners have worked together to invest in Inca Commerce Park and solidify its position as the key economic engine for the western part of our city and county. These partners include the private developer and ownership group, the city, the county, the Land of Sky Regional Council, the Asheville Chamber of Commerce, the NC Departments of Commerce and Transportation, and various utility partners. Investments that these partners helped coordinate over the years include critical infrastructure improvements like road and utilities extensions, as well as vital training programs at the adjacent Inca campus of AV Tech. These investments in infrastructure and in training programs are, of course, critical to attracting and retaining quality employers in manufacturing and distribution. As you heard from Brian, the proposed project will bring over 100 full-time living wage jobs to our community at a time of real need. Samet and their client have also made clear their commitment to preserving the historic Inca clock tower, which, among other things, shows their desire to be good stewards of the Inca community. The momentum at Inca Commerce Park is unmistakable. The opening in recent years of the New Belgium Distribution Center, the recent expansion at Jacob Holm Industries, and the ongoing construction of the Hawcon Industries facility scheduled for opening later this year are proof that the public-private investments made in the park are bearing fruit for our community. It is our hope that the Samet project can also be added to this list of successful job announcements at Inca. I hope that you'll give your support to this project as we work to continue building on the park's great momentum. Thank you for your time and have a good evening.
Council, that is the, I just had 3 speakers signed up to speak on this item. And so that concludes any public hearing portion of this item. The next step would be, as we've done with all these other public hearing items, is to entertain a motion to move this to the next agenda for a vote. But before we leave this item, are there any questions or comments regarding this application?
Mayor, this is Kim. Will there be an opportunity to make some comments after reviewing the traffic study at the next meeting?
Yes, yes, you can speak at the next meeting, deliberate, vote, but there will not be any further public comment. Anyone else have any? Yes.
Mayor, this is Sage. I would like to hear from Brian a little bit about some of the environmental impacts of this, or amenities. I believe there was some mention of electric vehicle charging, but it's being staged, or the infrastructure is being there, but the vehicles are maybe not electric. And I know there was some question about solar in a previous conversation. Brian, could you speak to any of that for us, please?
Yes, I would be happy to. The electric vehicle charging, I'll start there specifically. We are making the investments now as part of phase 1 of this project to be able to accommodate electric vehicle charging. The delivery type service vans are not physically currently available to be purchased and utilized. We expect the manufacturer of those vehicles to be coming in the next 24 to 36 months. And so we want to be able to immediately switch over to an electric vehicle fleet when that capability is there from the availability of electric service vans. And so we're installing roughly $3.5 million worth of electrical conduit now, so that there will be a charging station available, and the electrical infrastructure is already underneath the paving, so that when those vans have been manufactured and are available, we can implement the fleet vehicles to be electric. So there's a transition there that's largely dependent on the actual manufacture of those vehicles, but we're investing now up front several $1 million to be able to do that as soon as those vehicles are available. So that's the electric vehicle charging. You mentioned solar, so our plans for the project include constructing the facility in such a way that the structure of the building is capable of holding solar panels on the roof. But that, in concert with the electrical service for the building and the electrical service for the vehicles, is a complex electrical system all in that building. And so the building will be built structurally capable to hold the solar panels, but largely those solar panels, the target would also be somewhere in the 24 to 36 month range to be able to get those and put them in the building and sort of in concert with the vehicles. It's a collaborative mission as we work to tie all those electrical systems together in one facility. So day one, we're investing in the structure, the steel, the concrete to be capable of holding solar on the roof. The panels likely come, well, the target would be 24 to 36 months from occupancy or from operational start of that facility. And then other construction related, environmentally sensitive items that we will do is implement the construction pollution prevention plan on site. That includes erosion control and stormwater control, quantity and quality. And then there will be recycled content goals, both in our concrete mixes and our steel purchases as well.
So just a follow-up question to the solar then. So are you saying you are certainly going to have an electric fleet, and at some point within 24 to 36 months roughly, you will install solar panels, or you're not able to agree to that at this point? It's a maybe? I'm not quite sure if you're saying we're planning to.
It's a two-step process. So I'm not the guy that's going to make a commitment from an industry that says I'm going to locate in that building. That would come at some point in the future. I'm the guy that's supposed to get the zoning regulations in place to enable that to happen. And so I think the best that I can tell you is that in similar circumstances and in like projects that we've accomplished, the end user has definitive plans for an electric vehicle fleet, and has plans for implementing solar on the roof.
Thank you. And I did want to say, just for one of the public comments that we received, there was a mention of living wages. And just so we're all clear, the Just Economics Living Wage Certification Program is currently at $15.50. And we've all received, those of us that are living wage employers received this week a notice that it is jumping to $17.30. So I wouldn't want that public comment, that caller to think that this is living wage when it is quite not. Thank you.
I would also just want to clarify, when we're talking about wages starting at $15 an hour, that's just for full-time. That's not for the contract or part-time employees, correct?
That is correct. $15 an hour is a minimum rate for any employee, whether that's full-time, part-time, or independent contractors, although the structure of how the independent contractors are paid are often based on the scale of their contract, meaning do they have 1 van, 2 vans, 10 vans, accommodates how they're paid. But the minimum hourly rate for any employee is $15 an hour.
So there's an opportunity for a little bit of entrepreneurship in there. I'm curious, since we don't have the traffic impact analysis in front of us, Mr. Hall, could you speak a little bit to what I'm looking at on the site plan, which is the 13 loading docks, so I'm assuming lots of semis, 696 van parking spaces. So in lieu of having that in front of us, could you talk about how these 700 vans and multiple semis are going to access the property, and when and how and frequently?
Certainly be glad to. Generally speaking, the operation would function such that the facility would receive approximately 16 truckloads a day. So that would be 16 truck movements in and out a day. And generally, if you can think of it in terms of that being a supply to the facility, those trucks often come in the evenings in a after hours restocking type of movement. And then the products that would be in the building would then be loaded on the delivery service vehicles. Generally, that occurs in the morning. Occasionally, there's another shift later in the afternoon. Those goods, again, loaded onto the vans in the morning, and then those vans disperse throughout the day to make their deliveries. And then often there can be a second shift later in the day, just depending on customer demand.
Thank you. So mostly like a last mile facility is what I would consider that, right? So this is a distributing model where every day deliveries are going out, maybe like a same day delivery for each customer as a return, second trip, more orders, more deliveries. I'm trying to describe that this is a last mile facility, right? There's more activity, there's more frequency, there's what your client sounds like what they're trying to do is get more frequent delivery, perhaps like a same day delivery.
Right. The intent of the design of the facility is in that last mile facility. Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
I've wondered if, and this may be rhetorical, you may not know this, but I mean, if facilities like this that deliver goods that people are purchasing from their home, if there's ever been an analysis done of the miles not driven by people who live in their homes versus the delivery truck. And just in terms of, I'm just thinking about the carbon impact, the vehicle impact. If I stay home and order something, and so I'm not driving somewhere to get it, but a delivery van is delivering my goods, is this like a 1-to-1, so it's like a net neutral effect, or is that really not the impact of these kinds of facilities on communities like ours? And I say that rhetorically because I don't know that I don't expect anyone to know the answer to that, but I'm just curious about, the overall impact.
I can try to speak to that. To my knowledge, I have not seen a study on the reduction of VMTs in personal households, but I have seen studies, and I could send some articles around the increase in VMTs for these same-day deliveries. So I guess what you could say is, back in the day when all we had were mom and pop shops, you would go there and you get your 5 things. So now if you're starting to order one thing and it's being vanned over to your house, and then the next day you order another thing, you're creating more trips, expensive. You know what I mean? Like you're not buying all 25 things at once in the one location. So the tendency in the research is that it does increase VMTs. I did see in other cities that were facing unity, so worth noting. Good question, though.
Okay, any other questions before we go to a motion? Sorry.
I just have one more comment just to express a concern that I'm feeling personally, and that is about this zoning that, we had spent a lot of time working on the urban center zoning. I know I was involved in that in the affordable housing committee level. And the point of the urban zoning, if you look it up, actually, there's a really great image, and it shows what I would call a big box store and surrounded by a parking lot. And it says, this is what we don't want. And then it shows the image of this mixed use, sidewalk, pedestrian, shared building, and so on. And that was the point of the urban center. So my concern here is that Asheville is experiencing an ongoing housing crisis and housing shortage. So what we were doing in this attempt to zone all the zones that were identified as urban center future zones was to ensure that when things were built there, that they were mixed use, they were more pedestrian friendly, they were more environmentally sound, and they included housing. So what I'm trying to express here is that in this change of zoning, even though urban zoning wasn't officially adopted, which frankly is a delay on our end, what we're losing here is the ability to have housing on this site. And I know that what the structure they're proposing is not going to be capable to add it later. It's maxing out the site and so on. But I do want to share with fellow councilwomen that is my concern, that we are, in fact, saying, you know what, we're okay with not having housing here, even though we designated it for a mixed-use residential component in the near future. So just want to point that out because we do have an ongoing housing crisis. And I am concerned about the lack of housing in this kind of large project.
In addition, this is Kim, I'll add that, that in proximity to a grocery store, in proximity to infrastructure that can handle it, that is the kind of use that I want to see out of our land as well as dense development that incorporates housing on our major corridors where it can handle it.
And my goodness, education, right? Yeah.
And jobs.
All right, council, any other comments, any other information you want the applicant to provide in the interim before our next council, want staff to provide before our next council meeting? Obviously, if you think of it later, you can email it, but if you've got anything now, that'd be great. Yes, Stage.
I have one more, and I think I saw the applicant raise his hand as well. Can we speak a little bit, again, without the TIA? Is this bridge that we're being referred to, is it done? Or is it to be constructed? I'm sorry that I don't know.
Did you say bridge?
The bridge, this bridge that they're talking about.
The infamous bridge off of Smoky Park Highway that the county spent $2 million on.
It's done, it's in place?
Yes, it's there, and thank goodness someone might use it.
Yes, ma'am, we are. We're planning to use that bridge, and it is there. And we're thankful that it's there. Just a quick sidebar comment. The brownfields agreement that's in place for that site specifically states that residential is not allowed on that particular piece of property based on the previous contamination. So there's a bit of a restriction there based on that previous use from BASF and their previous contamination that was there that was dealt with in the brownfields agreement.
Thank you for pointing that out. I had wondered.
Okay, and Shannon, I don't know if you're still, I think you're still on here. If you've got anything to add as we close out before we hear a motion, is there anything you want to add at this point listening to this?
No, I was going to say the same thing about the brownfield, and
Yeah,
I had heard, although it has not been, but I haven't been able to confirm this, but I think there could be other deed restrictions in place on that property that also prohibit housing.
That's what I was going to say.
If you could bring that to our attention, that would be helpful, Shannon. And also, I have one more question for you, Shannon, if you don't mind. You mentioned the fenestration on the one side. Does this building comply with fenestration on all sides? Are we only worried about the one side?
In the commercial expansion district, we only concern ourselves with the primary facade.
One. That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
So, Mayor, this is Kathy Ball. I just wanted to add to the question that you had. We have been able to confirm with the owner, Martin Lewis, that it is deed restricted against residential.
Yeah, I remember I walked this site years ago, and that was mentioned that I think when Inca left the site, they deed restricted it so that it would not ever be able to be used for residential purposes. That was Kathy Ball, our assistant city manager, for anyone who's watching. People just pop into the screen. All right, any other questions or comments from council, from the applicant, staff, anyone? Okay, if not, again, I will need a motion and a second to recess the public hearing to consider the conditional zoning of 32.2 acres of property located at 99999 Sand Hill Road from commercial industrial district to commercial expansion / conditional zone for an approximately 130,000 square foot warehouse and distribution facility and surface parking and vehicle storage areas along with a change in the future land use map from urban center to employment anchor institution center until January 26, 2021.
So
okay, and I believe Ms. Kilgore made that motion, and then do I have a second?
I'll second Antoinette.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All right, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Okay, we will be voting on that at our next meeting. All right, council, it is 7:07. Let's just take a quick break. Let's come back at 7:15, and we're gonna do public hearing F, which is our last public hearing item. And we still do have some boards and commissions and then informal comment discussion. All right, council, let's take a break until 7:15, starting now. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back from our quick break here at the Asheville City Council meeting. We are up to public hearing item F, which is the last public hearing item on our agenda. This is an agenda item concerning the proposed Civil Service Board substantive rules. And we are going to hear from our interim Human Resources Director, Shannon Barrett, and our Deputy City Attorney, John Maddox, regarding this. And I believe Ms. Barrett will start the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. John Maddox and I are here tonight to talk with you about the proposed substantive rules, and I am going to turn it over to Mr. Maddox.
Hey, thank you, council members. It's a real pleasure to get to present this to you tonight. This is a culmination of a couple of years worth of effort to get some substantive rules passed by the Civil Service Board and in front of you. We're not going to belabor it too much and take up too much of your time tonight. I do want to give you a little bit of background on the Civil Service Act and some of Asheville's personnel laws. There's some peculiarities about that. Even as a municipality in North Carolina, it's important to understand sort of the context of what we've got going on here. Civil Service Act was passed 1953 by the General Assembly, and it's existed in one form or another since that time. The primary thing that the Civil Service Act does, which is a local act, applies only to the city of Asheville. It creates the Civil Service Board. The Civil Service Board is an entity that's a part of the city of Asheville, but also a part of it. They have their own council for grievance hearings, and they are not, like many other boards, subject to the city council's authority. Council appoints 2 members to the board. The members of the civil service elect 2 members to the board, and then those 4 members select the 5th member. That board performs 2 main functions. After many amendments and changes over the past 70 years, it now performs 2 main functions. The first one is that it reviews promotional criteria in the police and fire departments. What are the educational and experiential requirements in order to be a lieutenant in the police department, for example. Those are things that if the police department wants to make changes to those criteria, or the fire department wants to make changes to what it takes to be an engineer in the fire department, those changes first have to be approved by the Civil Service Board before they are applicable to the members of the civil service. The other more kind of high profile thing that the Civil Service Board does is it hears certain employee grievances. Under the Civil Service Act, if an employee is terminated, demoted, suspended, denied a raise in pay or promotion to which they are entitled, they have the right to bring an appeal before the Civil Service Board, and the Civil Service Board can overturn the decision that the city made and fashion a remedy for what they view as a incorrect decision. In those hearings, the city has a burden of proving that the employment decision that it made, the decision to terminate that employee, the decision to demote that employee is justified. What we've done, and have the next slide, please. Yes, so without getting too much further down to it, but one of the things that the Civil Service Act does is it requires that the Civil Service Board enact substantive rules. This was a change in 2009. Civil Service Board for a long time created all of the city's employment rules. All the policies dealing with leave, all the policies dealing with discipline, all of the various rules that apply to civil service were created by the Civil Service Board. That fell out over time, but in 2009, when the Civil Service Act was last amended, it included a provision that said the Civil Service Board must create substantive rules, and that those rules, for the first time, would be subject to amendment and adoption by the City Council. That did not happen in 2009. 2013, the Civil Service Board put in place procedural rules to govern how they're going to handle grievance hearings, but there have not been any substantive rules. This is typically not a big problem for the city in that the day-to-day administration, the expectations for employees are set through administrative procedures passed by the city manager's office and through departmental rules and policies. So employees understand the expectations and the standards they're going to be held to. This does present a problem, though, when the city makes employment decisions and those decisions come before the Civil Service Board, because they have not set out what these various terms mean, what the standards are going to be when a employment decision is in front of that board. So for that reason, the city's been requesting for many years now that the Civil Service Board put together substantive rules. There was a subcommittee formed by the Civil Service Board in 2014, but for a variety of reasons, they never actually adopted rules. If I could have the next slide, please. So roughly, I would say actually when Mr. Branham came on, the city started examining how we could maybe go about coming up with some substantive rules, asking the Civil Service Board to adopt substantive rules. We decided to re-engage on the process, and the board agreed to re-engage with the city on this process. We also said that we were going to change our approach. We were going to talk with the various employee associations about what these rules could look like and try to make this a more collaborative approach than it's been in the past at arriving towards some rules that work for both the city and the employee, that rules that recognize that the city has to have a transparent and predictable way of holding its employees accountable, but that also recognizes that those employees have valuable due process rights and rights in a fair and equitable way to have their grievances heard. And so with that approach, we approached the various employee associations, worked very collaboratively with them, and I'm happy to say that the Civil Service Board in December passed on these substantive rules, and now that's what's before you tonight. If I could have the next slide, please. I'm a little bit behind on the slide, but have the next one, please. So I'm going to turn this. So what we've done here is we've created definitions in these rules, and the Civil Service Act and Civil Service Board has agreed to these definitions that are going to apply in future Civil Service Board hearings. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Barrett to talk you through some of these various definitions and how they work and some of the other changes that are made in these rules for the classified service.
Thank you, John. So first up is classified service, and this is actually defined in the Civil Service Act. And basically what the Act does is to define an employee in the classified service as any personnel who are below that level of assistant department director. So the majority of our employees are actually considered to be in the classified service, and that is defined in the Act. Next slide, please. One of the other things that was done with these rules was to provide, as John said, definitions so that we had clarity and consistency with how these terms were being applied. One is demotion, and so in this circumstance, demotion is considered an involuntary and permanent reassignment into a position in a lower pay grade. Discharge is also defined in the rules as involuntary and permanent separation from employment with the city due to a violation of the city policy or unsatisfactory work performance. And again, this does indicate that an employee is not performed satisfactorily or has violated a city policy and is therefore discharged from service with the city. Entitled, John alluded to this a little bit. Entitled in this circumstance is an absolute right to a promotion or a raise and pay automatically. And so what we mean here, or what is meant in this situation, is, for example, if an employee has been served in time in service in a position or has attained a specific certification or educational requirement, there is an automatic process for them to promote or receive a raise in pay that is entitled. Next slide. Suspension is defined as an involuntary and temporary unpaid leave. This is where a change was made from our current standard. So in the new set of substantive rules, it's defined as 14 calendar days. Currently, it is, the standard is 10 work shifts. And in making this change, we're addressing an equity issue for some employees, such as firefighters, who generally have different shifts and may not work consecutive days. So we will be coming back to you with a recommendation for a change to the ordinance related to the Civil Service Board, so it will align with this change. And then transfer, in this case, transfer means an involuntary and permanent reassignment into a position into a different city department. Next slide, please. Due process. So due process ensures that an employee receives notice of the allegations against them, and that they're also provided with an opportunity to be heard by a department director prior to any decision being made. And if a department is utilizing a disciplinary matrix, then the discipline should align to the guidance from that matrix. And then probationary employees, these are newly hired, rehired, promoted, or voluntarily transferred employees who are probationary for 365 days. And this clarification aligns with the definition of probationary as defined in the Civil Service Act.
So I'll pick back up here. And I should note that these might seem like, okay, these definitions seem very obvious. I assure you that many of these points have been the subject of prior litigation before the Civil Service Board, and litigation before the Civil Service Board is onerous and hard and requires a lot of city staff and resources. And not only that, but we pay the board's attorney. The employee is paying their attorney. Oftentimes, it's a lot. So the fact that we're getting clarity around these things is going to hopefully take away the need for a lot of litigating about what these terms mean or what they might not mean. Speaking of the grievance hearings, this is another change that we made. So as I noted earlier, under the Civil Service Act, an employee has the right to bring a hearing before the Civil Service Board for these specific reasons. And in those hearings, the burden is on the city to prove that the action complained of is justified. Well, justified is one of those terms that, what does that mean? Well, courts have in the past interpreted that. We've had cases go to the Court of Appeals from the Civil Service Board, and they said justified means just, right, and fair, which is, again, very not helpful in trying to determine whether a certain action is going to meet that standard or not. So what the Civil Service Board has done here is they have adopted a two-part test, a definition, if you will, of what justified means. And the way this works is justified means that an employee received due process, and we defined that earlier. They had notice and an opportunity to be heard, and their discipline level accords with the disciplinary matrix. And second, that the employee violated a city or departmental rule or policy, that they did something that is prohibited by a departmental rule. Let's say if it's a police officer, it would be a rule of conduct. The APD is very clear, rules of conduct. Whether the employee violated a departmental or city rule, the department director is going to be afforded, be the judge according to an abuse of discretion standard, which means that the decision of the department director to terminate that employee, to demote that employee, is going to be decided according to a abuse of discretion standard, which means it's not clearly unreasonable, erroneous, or arbitrary. It might seem like a small thing, but that provides us with a lot of clarity. That's something we can actually bank on as a recognizable legal standard, whereas justified was a little bit more nebulous. So the city's personnel laws, it's kind of it's a real knot to untie sometimes, and it requires a lot of inquiry. So I understand if people have questions about this. I can tell you that this is a win for the city in the view of our office. It took a lot of support. I really appreciate Mr. Branham's support in getting this across the line. We couldn't have done it without his guidance and support on it, and we really couldn't have gotten here without the good faith interaction from various employee associations, including the Police Benevolent Association, the Firefighters Association, and also the FOP. They all came to the table and were willing to talk, and their input was valuable, and we have better rules as a result of this. And I'm hoping this can be a model for future collaboration on helping enhance accountability and also being good and fair to our employees. We'd be happy to take any questions y'all might have.
Esther, this isn't really a question, but I'm gonna make a statement here. I have been the liaison for the Civil Service Board since I started on City Council, so this is my 7th year. And I echo a lot of what John said in the sense that a lot of these issues, although they may seem trite and that, well, shouldn't anybody understand that distinction? The Civil Service Board and the City Attorney's Office would argue for 2 or 3 days over these issues. So this is gonna help a lot. And I just really want to commend John Maddox for his diligence and patience and ability to compromise and the amazing work. After serving in this role, bringing together all these diverse groups, the HR department, the representatives of police and fire, and the Civil Service Board, and to get agreement. I know that this has been yeoman's work on his part, and I just really wanted to commend him. And this has been a long time coming, and I really think it's going to pave a smooth path forward. And so I'm just wholeheartedly supportive.
John, I'd like to ask you a question. Could you go into a little bit more details about the probationary period? What does that entail exactly?
Certainly. So that's one of the ones that we are constrained under the Civil Service Act, that probationary period, if you're a probationary employee, you're not actually a member of the classified service until your probationary period ends. So if the probationary period is 1 year, from the date that you are hired, you are not a member of the classified service until 1 year out. That means that if you are terminated 6 months in, or if you're demoted 6 months in, you do not have rights under the Civil Service Act to bring a claim before the board. That's pretty standard in most places. And we did some things here. One of the problems we have is that police officers, for instance, they're new employees from the time they begin their basic law enforcement training. They're working for the city while they're in training. So that takes, a while, a few months. And then when they come onto the department, they're not released to the street immediately. They're in field training for a good portion of that time. So we might have them as probationary employees only able to judge their performance for a few months before they become full-blown members of classified service. And it becomes, we have, with all the Civil Service Board rights and the things attendant thereto, to take significant disciplinary action against them. So by making this a year as far as we can go, we would like to make a longer probationary periods to account for that, but the act constrains us to 1 year. And some of the employee associations were actually in favor of a longer period, some less, and this was a sort of the compromise position.
I have a few questions. So just to confirm, this is Kim, for those who are watching from home, that the Civil Service Board is very unique in Asheville in the sense that we're one of 6 in the state, and we're one and maybe the only city that it covers all the employees, not just a few departments, correct?
I believe that's right.
Okay, so in the slide it said that the promotional consideration was just for APD and AFD. Is that for all departments as well?
No, the promotional criteria, that is only in the police and fire departments per the Civil Service Act.
Okay, and Gwen, I appreciate the input that you gave with your tenure there. Did this go through council subcommittees like the Finance and Human Relations Subcommittee? The Boards and Commissions Committee that appoint the Governance Committee for Policy?
No, it did not. This one still at the Civil Service Board. It's sort of their row to hoe, as it is.
Okay, so I'm just looking too for opportunities for the public to engage and really to dissect this because it is overdue. The Civil Service Board, the vote that I read, it passed 4-1. Were there any stated concerns from the person dissenting?
I would not want to speak for General Devereaux, who was the dissenting vote. I call him General. He was an Air Force general, so I tend to call him General Devereaux. He's a very intelligent, very smart man. I think if I was to try to paraphrase, though, he felt like this took away too much of the board's discretion and placed it in the hands of the department head to make the decision. And I was honest with the board, and I'll be honest with you that we feel like this is placing more discretion where it belongs, in the hands of the various departments who oversee the employees, so they can effectively oversee their workforce. They're in the best position to judge what is acceptable conduct, what is acceptable performance. But there is still a role for the Civil Service Board. When that discretion that the various department heads have is abused, then the Civil Service Board has the ability to step in. And I feel like Mr. Devereaux felt that it went too far that way, if I was to try to stand for his point.
So if I'm to get to the spirit of where I'm headed, is that in the state of North Carolina, we have so few protections for workers. So because this is unique, and ultimately I would like to see us not have a civil service board, because I'm not sure it's doing us a service the way that it functions. But if it was going to work to protect our workers, it does seem with the having to wait a year, which we can't change. I want to see, like, who are the people that we have engaged with, our community partners who have been making input about the Civil Service Board? Have they been engaged? I'm thinking of the NAACP, either at a local or a state level, the Racial Justice Coalition. And if we have engaged our partners, can you speak to when they have participated in engagement?
If you're speaking about engagement around these rules, I did not engage with any particular groups outside the employee associations. This is how the city is interacting with its workforce. So we felt like it was important to be engaging with those employee associations. So, Councilman Whistler, I don't know if there's any other kinds of around this. I know that those groups have engaged around Civil Service Board in the past. Part of our thinking with this was that we need to be more collaborative with the employee associations to try to bring something positive to the table, and like recognizing what I talked about before, which is the city and these employee associations have an interest in accountability, and everybody has an interest in fairness. And if we all recognize that's the place where we're coming from, then we'll arrive at rules that work. But we were not looking to engage everybody in Asheville on that. This was primarily with the employees who are most affected.
John, if I may also step in, this is City Attorney Branham. Councilwoman Roney, I think that's an excellent question that you ask, and let me answer it in a way perhaps that is beyond the scope of this particular presentation. For some time now, especially given the events taking place in Asheville and around the country over the last several months, we have been working very closely with a lot of neighborhood advocacy groups, including the Racial Justice Coalition, the Black Ministers Association, as well as numerous other individual members of the community, regarding some of our efforts to deal with several aspects of employee accountability, specifically in the police department, as well as just the institutional structure of a variety of sort of local regulations, ordinances, and these sorts of things that we felt were not functioning to the maximum capacity in order to, as John said, continue to maintain the due process rights of employees, but also ensure that we as a city are able to hold our employees accountable for their actions when necessary and appropriate. Now, although we may not have spent a lot of time on this particular initiative, it's these sorts of things that we have incorporated part and parcel into the broader scheme of our efforts to try to hopefully revolutionize the standards that we hold our employees to and the tools that are at our disposal to be able to treat them fairly while still ensuring that we have accountability. So this has been one of the pieces to the much larger puzzle that we've been putting together and continue to work on with some of those groups on a fairly regular basis.
Council, are there any other questions for staff on this item? I do not think we have anyone signed up to speak on this item. Nope, we don't have anyone to sign up to speak on this item. And again, we're going to need a motion to be able to consider this for a vote at our next hearing,
But we did get an email public comment about that.
Yeah. Oh, no, I just mean we don't have anyone signed up to speak live. We got one email from, I believe, a current employee. Any other questions or comments?
I guess the only comment that I'll add is I'm looking for, when we're having such a potential significant context for us to have those community partners at the table, I'm inclined to vote no at this time because it hasn't had the depth of analysis that it could have.
Councilwoman Roney, do you think that the 2 weeks between now and when we vote is adequate for input, or is that just insufficient?
That's a good question. I'm going to dig in more. I just think that, especially, we have gotten an email from a community member asking about some of this transparency and just a comparison of like what we had before and what we have now, what it actually does. And some of that analysis I think would be helpful. So hopefully that'll happen in the next 2 weeks.
Councilwoman Roney, I did speak with a representative from the Racial Justice Coalition about these changes. I spent about 45 minutes with him over the weekend. He approached me and asked about, and I think that, so he would have had an opportunity then to weigh in if he disagreed, et cetera. But I'm realizing it was informal, but I did have a conversation.
And with respect to a community member who emailed yesterday, if we're talking about the same community member, I sent him back a very extensive response and invited him to contact me if he had any further questions, so I could help clarify anything else with him on this point, especially around public engagement, because this was the subject of numerous Civil Service Board meetings, and there were draft rules out there. This was very transparent. And I have not heard from him since I emailed him yesterday afternoon, and I haven't heard from him today. So I'm hoping I answered his questions. If not, he can certainly get in touch with me in the next 2 weeks.
Thank you.
I would just like to add something there around our outreach. It may not be very popular to say, but I know that there are some groups that we ordinarily go to whenever there is an outreach process. But when it comes to something pretty judicial like this, I think that we need to reach out to people who would understand a hearing process, will understand how powerful language is, and be able to kind of comb through those definitions. And not just people on the general level who would give us feedback, but someone or groups of people who understand criminal justice, who understand judicial process, who understand the power of language and how language is used in determining cases and different things like disciplinary actions and stuff. So I think we should kind of cater our outreach to that specific skill set, as well as others too. But, I'm just saying that because we tend to go to people, and I don't think they always have the scope to give us the best information.
Yeah, I sort of.
I was just going to add, I don't want to feel like the staff's getting too beat up on here in this when we're having this discussion. We're a new council gelling together here, and we're going to keep gelling. We do have what we call check-in meetings with council members regarding agenda items ahead of time. That's going to be the best time for us to say, here's our expectation. We really want to see this kind of engagement before this item comes up on the agenda. And so, or even, earlier if we know it. Now, a lot of times we don't know about a matter until it comes up, and there's not a lot of time between the check-in and the council meeting. I recognize that. But we do sense, we do ask staff to kick things out further because we think more input's needed. So anytime we know that's coming or we're going to feel that way, we'll try staff our best to communicate that to you ahead of time. On this particular issue, I have strong feelings about our civil service board. I have lobbied for changes regarding our civil service board because I do think it is an impediment and has been an impediment for us to terminate employees that even directors want to terminate, who have committed wrongs that council and directors are in agreement should be terminated. And our civil service board has a unique power to be able to reinstate terminated employees, which is not like any other civil service board in the state. So there are some issues that concern our community about how our civil service board functions. However, what we're talking about here today in this council meeting are rule changes that are, more process and administratively oriented, and don't get at those other issues that I think are, they're not resolvable by us because they have to be legislatively resolved. But we do have this. We do have the requirement actually as a council to vote on rules like this. I guess I don't have a problem with doing more community outreach on it. I'm just not sure exactly what it would gain us on this particular issue, just because these are, internally process-oriented rules rather than bigger issues that affect the community, like can we terminate an employee or not? If I've got that wrong, John, if I'm just capturing that incorrectly, let me know. But that was kind of my sense of what we're talking about in this context.
You're not wrong, but I don't want to underscore that this is a significant change, and it is a change toward accountability. I really do think that. I have a hard time thinking of this as anything but a win for the city and for our ability to hold employees accountable, while also recognizing that while I agree, Mayor, past efforts at making changes to the Civil Service Board have not gone over well because other employee-oriented organizations, they have lobbyists in Raleigh too. And so being more collaborative with us has gotten us to a place where I feel like this is a win for everybody. And I think the HR department views this as a win for their ability to effectively help department directors make decisions about employees and about discipline and being efficient in how they go about their daily HR decisions.
Yeah, I actually feel like this is very responsive to the request for the racial equity groups, because the Civil Service Board has stopped the city from taking disciplinary actions against certain public safety officials that I think if you ask the community, should that person have been disciplined, they would have agreed with the city decision, but the Civil Service Board turned it around. So I think this is a move toward more equity and actually being very responsive to what the community is asking us to do, especially around public safety officials.
And if I certainly don't want to keep this all night with this, but the Civil Service Board voted on these rules, which we view as good. This board, we've done a lot to work with this board and to be more collaborative with this board, and for us to have a good working relationship with them that recognizes they have a legal, recognized, statutorily given role, and that they are going to carry out that role. And we are going to sometimes be advocates for them, sometimes be partners with them. Hopefully this is the beginning of a good working relationship with our Civil Service Board. That is my hope.
And let me just clarify my comment. It wasn't directed towards this process, but I've heard like a lot of times when we go out to community to shop ideas, I know that there is customarily a handful of people that we tend to attend to, but there are a lot of experts around matters And those people send us emails, and those people try to engage because of their breadth of knowledge around the topic. So I just wanted us to be very cognizant when we do have direction from a council person to do outreach, that we're not misusing our time, not concerning this instance, but that we're actually going out to groups with some type of framework around what kind of information are we trying to look for what community groups or community individuals will be needed in order to give us the best feedback to direct us in formulating policy and process.
Thank you.
I just, at this stage, I wanted to share that I read the email that we received from the community member as well. And in that email, the gist I read was the process of getting input was their concern, but they generally felt like the changes were in the right direction and a good move for the city. And I just wanted to make sure we echoed that too.
Okay, council, if there's not any other questions or comments regarding this item, I don't want to cut anyone off. If there is, I will entertain a motion. I gotta get my motion here. Do I have a motion and a second to recess the public hearing on the agenda? Public hearing, typo there, on proposed Civil Service Board substantive rules until January 26, 2021.
So moved. Gwen.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and I'll take a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
And Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself as mayor, aye. All right, thank you, Shannon. Thank you, John, for joining us tonight. We do not have any unfinished business this evening. Under new business, we have boards and commissions, and I'm going to turn it over to the vice mayor to conduct this portion of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had a pretty lengthy meeting today. Thank you to the council members who serve on the committee and also the staff members. We are a newly formed board, so it kind of took us some time to, we're kind of working through some things, being considerate and careful in our process. And with that being said, before I go forth with asking your approval for our recommendations, I wanted to talk more about my personal decision to vote down an approval concerning the school board appointment recommendation. Okay, so by vote, we voted 2-1, myself against the reappointment of current and eligible members of the school board. After further consideration, I kind of thought about the context that we're currently in, and I would like to make a motion supporting my nay vote. Okay, so I move that the clerk's office advertise the seats and accept applications to consider the current and eligible members in process, along with opening up the application process. With the boards and commission committee later in February, on February 12th, looking to see if we want to establish an essay question and interview question as a part of that appointment process at that time.
I'll second the motion. This is Antoinette.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I didn't understand who seconded that.
That was Antoinette.
Thank you.
Okay, so with the motion in a second, I'll go through a roll call vote.
Can I make a point of discussion for a second? Would you mind, Vice Mayor Smith? I think it's appropriate now. I appreciate your request because I agree with you. And in light of everything that's been going on in the community around the school board, around the potential sale of a building, and quite frankly, what I know I have had to get up to speed on, I am wondering if at our next meeting, when we handle this issue, if we could also request of staff or Brad in particular to talk to us about school board appointments versus electing school board members, what that process looks like, who can decide that, how can that change. And I bring this up so that we as a community and a council can inform this whole process for the community's sake. Because I know I'm getting emails that are all over the place, and what can we do and why don't we change it? And I think the community would be best served by a conversation around this. That's all.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I had a chance to have a conversation with the current board chair, the school board chair, and she agrees that there are a lot of conversations about maybe a possible elected process, but also other things that affect both of these boards and our community. So she suggested that moving forward, we have more joint meetings. So I recommend instead of going just as an independent body around a conversation about where we should go next, I think a more appropriate next step for me would be to host a joint meeting with the school board, and maybe that can be an agenda item that we discuss.
This is Kim. I
I
support
love
that.
the idea, and I would welcome the county to participate since they have a capital role to play in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
I
you.
would get to be inclusive in this conversation. Then their voices can be represented directly.
I think that's a great idea. We have had joint meetings in the past. We've been able to do them obviously in person. I don't know if we can wait that long, but I think that's a great idea. Are you saying at a joint meeting, we would broach the discussion about whether or not there's support for the idea of going to the legislature and asking to make a change to an elected school board rather than an appointed school board?
I think that's something we may want to present to them and ask them, if they wanted to be invited into a conversation before we just make a decision, to have a conversation about that board, the board makeup, and how those individuals are either elected or appointed or both. I think we can invite them into that conversation.
And then I would assume process-wise, if anyone in the public's listening and is concerned about this topic, which I know a lot of people are, I would imagine before this council ever made the decision to ask our legislators to put in a bill to make that change, we would vet that in a meeting and allow people to come and comment about that. In fact, this council, not us, but previous councils have done that before on this topic, so that folks listening to this would know that there would be opportunities to participate in that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can add, hopefully this will be a benefit to those who are hearing it, but what we heard in the Boards and Commissions Committee today is that no matter what process we take on as a council, that there is a deadline where we need to have the seats filled by, is it April 1st?
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm supporting an advertising of the openings, while also holding in mind that we have a recommendation from the school board and experienced members who have given the time and have been attending.
Yeah, my train of thought in making this decision and actually putting forth a nay vote was exactly that, because there is that level of conversation around how we appoint and how those members are chosen. I think we should always consider opening up this process to an application process to give the community some type of look into our rationale and our process.
I totally support this. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
All right, I'm going to go through with a roll call vote. Mayor Manheimer. We didn't hear you, Mayor.
You're muted. You're muted.
Aye. Sorry.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Thank you, ladies. We have a lot more, though. So we're going to move on to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. We have one vacancy. The board recommends Barbara Ann Phillip. Can I get a second?
I'll second. This is Antoinette.
Thank you. I'll call a roll call vote. Mayor Manheimer.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler,
Aye.
and myself, aye. The African American Heritage Committee has one vacancy, and the committee recommends Beverly Miller. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor Manheimer,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
All right, thank you. And myself, aye. We're moving on to the ABC Board. They have 3 vacancies. The board, the committee recommends the reappointment of Robin Cape and the appointment of Sharon West and Nian Avery. Is there a second?
Second. Kim Roney here.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
You missed Turner.
Oh, Councilwoman Turner, thank you.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler,
Nay.
and myself, aye. The Board of Adjustments has 2 regular member vacancies and 3 alternate member vacancies. The committee recommends reappointing Paul. I don't want to mess up his name. I'm going to spell it out. Wilczynski. I'm sorry, Mr. Paul, for that, but I would rather ask for I would rather not ask for forgiveness in badgering your name. But he's a regular member, and for reappointment, we also have the appointment of alternate Susan Godsey, and she is a 2nd regular member. We're reappointing John Keldis, and also re-advertising for the 2 outstanding alternate seats that are vacant. Can I get a second?
Kim Roney here, second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler,
Aye.
and myself, aye. The Downtown Commission has 4 vacancies. The committee recommends the reappointment of Andrew Fletcher, Kimberly Hunter, Stephen Lee Johnson, and the appointment of Guillermo Rodriguez. Can I get a second?
Kim Roney, second.
All right, I think Kim got that one. I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler,
Aye.
and myself, aye. All right, the Human Relations Commission, and I believe that there were some questions submitted by Councilwoman Turner about the vacancies. If you would like to pose that question, I would ask that you pose that question to the board liaison, Kim Roney.
Sure. So when I emailed, I was reviewing the packet, and I noticed that all 3 members on this particular board had resigned. And I didn't know if there was more that we needed to know before we considered appointing more people.
I am the new liaison to the HRCA, and I am leading on the leadership of the existing HRCA co-chairs at this moment and their recommendation. As we move forward, I do think that exit interviews for our volunteer advisors on boards and commissions are a very important part of city process, and support the work of the clerk's office in doing that. I don't have any other information at this time.
All right.
I understand. And I like that idea, especially in the case of a resignation. Thank you.
Okay, with that being said, the committee recommends Susie Chandler, Melanie Noyes, and Daniel Young. Is there a second?
Antoinette, I'll second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler,
Aye.
and myself, aye. The Metropolitan Sewage District has one vacancy. The board recommends the reappointment of Councilmember Gwen Whistler. Can I get a second?
Second.
I have a vote, a
I'm
motion.
sorry, I did not see who seconded that.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler. And myself, aye. Multimodal Transportation Committee had two vacancies. The committee recommends the reappointment of Michael Stratton to the at-large seat and Maggie Ullman to the bike and pedestrian seat. Is there a second?
Kim
I'll
Roney,
second.
second. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
All right, Gwen, on the second. I have a motion and a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Right, y'all, we have three more, at least three more. The Neighborhood Advisory Committee has two vacancies, an at-large seat and one for the 28804 seat. The committee recommends Peter Abzug for the at-large seat and Wendy Hayner for the 28804 seat. Is there a second?
This is Gwen, and I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler,
Aye.
and myself, aye.
Vice Mayor Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
I think you skipped the audit committee.
Vice Mayor, I believe you're going to talk about that at the end of the board appointments.
Yeah, the audit committee, we're going to re-advertise for the audit committee. And we're also going to re-advertise for Riverfront Redevelopment Commission. Okay.
Is that because we didn't have applications? I know Riverfront did not. Did audit not have any applications either?
Audit did. We had a pretty good discussion about where we should go when there is a county representative as an applicant. So we talked about whether we would consider their application because they're not city residents, but they might have a special skill or a special expertise that we really need. So after outreach, we decided that was the only person we got. So we kind of entertained that conversation, but decided to do a little more outreach to see what we could get because the individual is a skilled CPA, but we thought we could find a CPA to fill that position who is a city resident.
Thank you for the context.
All right. P&Z, the committee recommends the appointment of Robert Hoke. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor?
She's muted.
Yeah, she's getting it.
Aye. All right.
Councilwoman Kilgore?
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney?
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Then safety, the committee recommends the appointment of Kim Austin, Steve Barron, and Tim Ormond. Is there a second?
Kim Roney, second.
All right. We'll do a roll call vote. Mayor,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler,
Aye.
and myself, aye. And the last one is the Urban Forestry Commission. They had 3 vacancies. The committee recommends the reappointment of Cecil Bothwell, Sharon Sumrall, and Karen DeJong. Is there a second?
Kim Roney, second.
I'll do a roll call vote. Mayor,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
and Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Okay, those are all the appointments and reappointments that we recommended. But again, the committee recommends re-advertising for the Audit Committee and the Riverfront Redevelopment Commission. And before I turn it back over to Mayor, I would like to thank the council's help at giving us some advice around just good information about folks you all recommended that kind of gave some weight to our discussion. So let's continue to do that, as well as kind of helping us with outreach. Yes, thank you. I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank
You
you.
did great job, you 3. You were brand new on that. Great job.
Yeah.
Oh, it was work. It was hard. we had a lot, but again, with Councilwoman Roney and Councilwoman Mosley, we put a lot of time into looking through the applications and making sure that, you know, when we weren't sure, we were very considerate and careful, you know, taking our time to make sure we're thorough with this volunteer, because we admire volunteers and thank them for their time. So thank you.
And this is Kim, if I could add just a few words with the folks that we had outgoing and the number of folks that we had incoming. I've heard other council members say this before, and I totally agree. We have a tremendous resource of people in our community that are spending time and energy bringing their professional and lived experience to the table. Seeing the outgoing members, I have a lot of gratitude, and I look forward to the work of the incoming members of our boards and commissions.
Thank you. Well, I assume we don't have to appoint anyone to a board anytime soon after this evening. That's the longest one I think I've seen. Okay, we have come to the informal discussion and public comment period of the agenda. Staff will now connect live calls from our speaker queue for informal discussion and public comment. Again, we're only taking callers who signed up in advance. Callers, you will first hear staff inform council that you're next to speak. Then you'll hear an automated message letting you know you are unmuted and live in the meeting. You may begin speaking after the automated message. If you accidentally drop out of the speaker queue, just redial the number and meeting code, press *3 to rejoin the speaker queue. You'll have 3 minutes to comment, and at the end of the 3 minutes, you'll hear the bell and staff will ask you to wrap up your comment. And just for planning purposes, folks, we do not have a closed session tonight. That's correct. I'm looking at our city attorney here, and Maggie's giving us a thumbs up. We do not have a closed session. We have 8 people that have signed up for public comment this evening. So after that, we will be adjourning. All right, thank you. Staff, please proceed with the public comment.
Our first caller is Paul Schumann. Mr. Schumann, can I have you pause for just a second? We're having some difficulty hearing you. Sorry about that, Mr. Schumann. Can you go ahead and start again? Thank you.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm calling tonight to share in what was also surely your horror when a group of people, terrorists, insurrectionists, white supremacists, call them what you will, stormed the Capitol building and were able to run free for over 3 hours. Run free for over 3 hours inside the Capitol, the building that's held as the beacon of democracy for this country. Over 3 hours. When we think about what it means to be able to invade the United States Capitol with a Confederate flag, hang it, then run free inside the building while taking selfies with law enforcement without any repercussions for all but the people who are being gently arrested after being told by the president, quote, "Go home, we love you, you're very special," quote. And it's critical to note that our very own representative, Madison Cawthorn, was a speaker who encouraged the insurrection alongside the president. The thing is, we should be horrified, as I'm sure you all are, but we shouldn't be shocked. We shouldn't be surprised. We knew this would happen, and of course, it didn't have to happen, but it did, and it's worth considering why. Personally, it seems pretty obvious. I invite you to join me in a quick thought experiment. Bring images to your mind of the typical, or even the most confrontational protests since the murder of George Floyd and countless other Black people. What images come to mind? Are they of people storming federal buildings with weapons, Confederate flags, MAGA flags, and bloodthirsty chants? Probably not. Yet what happened to them? There were mass arrests. Yes. Were people invited into federal buildings to defame them and take selfies with law enforcement? No. The differences couldn't be more stark. Non-violent, unarmed people marching in the streets being tear gassed, shot with rubber bullets, and arrested on a massive scale, versus a group of insurrectionist terrorists who entered the Capitol with an enemy flag, weapons, and were nothing short of embraced, maybe even encouraged or aided by law enforcement. I'll leave conclusions and analysis to you individually, but I find the cause to be clear, deeply disturbing, pervasive, and fortunately able to be handled by you. White supremacy on full display and the dire, dire need for reparations. Please use your unique positions of power to finally bring the justice that was so obviously absent at the Capitol on January 6th by continuing what City Council began last year and ensuring that true reparations are brought to Asheville now. Removing Vance Monument is another small but meaningful step in that direction. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Greenleaf Clark.
Hello, Council. Calling with you again. This is Greenleaf Clark from North Asheville. With this specific section of the meeting, I want to reiterate the importance of following through on the reparations that this council voted for in July of 2020. No action has yet been taken, and as far as Black Asheville Demands has laid out for the city, is abundantly clear that the first step needs to be taken in order to achieve reparations is to defund the police. No action has been taken on that yet, and yes, we do not count the 3% shuffling of funds that was done by the city. That does not count as defunding the police. We demand defunding the police by at least 50%, and then on from there, achieving other milestones in providing reparations to the Black community of Asheville. That was not on the agenda tonight. A bunch of committee appointments and capital projects were. I don't disregard the importance of those latter line items, but there's no comparison to the importance of reparations. That should have been front and center on the agenda tonight, and it's a shame. It's a shame that this council did not address that issue immediately and take action immediately. Furthermore, I would like to speak quickly on COVID safety. According to the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Buncombe County has suffered 198 deaths from COVID so far. 32 of those happened in the last week alone. Those numbers were based off of a couple days ago. And yet Asheville continues to leave hotels open. They continue to leave the tourism industry open. That tourism industry is killing us. It is killing the workers of the city. It's killing the locals of the city. And this city council continues to prioritize the money that is flowing in from that tourism industry over the actual lives of the people that live here. Choose the people of Asheville over profit and shut down the tourism industry while we still can to save lives. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Victoria Estes.
Hi there, City Council. My name's Victoria, and I am from South Asheville. I'm just calling to speak on a couple of things. Consent Agenda A. It is unacceptable to erase the harm caused by arming murderers. We demand that these meeting notes not be approved until they reflect the accountability for that. There is no reason that the police need any extra money, any extra training, or new guns. Consent Agenda B. I'm just here to remind you that Black Asheville has made their demands clear for almost an entire year now. And while you guys have made lots of promises on that, I haven't seen anything concrete come out of that. I know there was a 30, 60, 90-day plan, and we are well past 90 days, and I have seen nothing more than some random events for people to voice their words. I insist that you guys prioritize reparations when developing the fiscal year 2021 to 2022 budget, even though it's already a little too late. Consent Agenda C. This contract has not kept the Asheville population safe, and I think that you should terminate this contract and instead reopen and safely maintain the public bathrooms that we already have. As for reparations, like I said, it has been quite a while, and I would like to see that happen. Also, I would like to speak on the fact that in the midst of this pandemic, there is not nearly enough resources available for the people that are sleeping out in the streets. I know we have Code Purple, but it only opens every once in a while. And as someone who has been active in mutual aid this year, I think it is really important that some of the mutual aid programs, like maybe Asheville Survival Program, be funded, because the people that are running those programs are the ones that are out there, like Beloved Asheville, every day, feeding these people, making sure they stay warm, providing them with tents, everything that we can do because the government is not providing them for what they need. I think that you guys are making some good steps towards affordable housing. I would like to see you guys maybe support like Beloved Asheville's affordable housing, where they're building the tiny houses so that people can get off the streets. I think you guys are doing some good work. I would like to see it continue. I appreciate everything y'all do. Yeah, thank you. Have a nice day.
Council, our next caller is Mary Clarissa Marshall.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Great. So my name is Clarissa Marshall, and I have a residence in Haw Creek. I also own a small business in downtown Asheville on West Walnut Street. I'm a native to the area. I'm a volleyball coach at A.C. Reynolds Middle School, a mother of 3 children. I'm calling in to voice my concern over some recent events that happened while I was working downtown in the past couple of months. The homeless problem downtown has exacerbated over the past year in a way that's affecting me and my business. This morning at 11 a.m., I literally had to step over a homeless person sleeping in the middle of the sidewalk outside the Rankin garage where I park. I also passed a man walking down the street talking to himself and missing the front part of his pants, and that was at 8 a.m. 2 weeks ago, I had clients from out of town come into my office to sign documents for the purchase of their new home. They're an elderly couple relocating from Florida. They came in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they looked visibly shaken upon entry. They said they had parked a couple of blocks away, and they were asked for money from 3 different people on their walk from their car to my office. And they felt so scared walking downtown in Asheville that they didn't wish to meet at my office in the future. I was watching a football game at a local restaurant and a bar in East Asheville last week, and it's located beside a thrift store where you can leave your donations after hours. There was a homeless man sifting through the donations, and he was sporting a 12-inch hunting knife and talking to himself as I left at around 4 p.m. I did not feel safe in a spot where I hang out regularly because of the weapon on display. I also read today in the paper that yesterday someone was stabbed in West Asheville at the exit ramp by a homeless person that they were trying to help. This is really tough to stomach for me. It's truly gotten out of hand. It really needs to be addressed immediately. My 16-year-old daughter is a 10th grader at Reynolds High School and has been coming to work with me while learning virtually downtown. I took her and my son to get ice cream, and while we were walking on College Street back to the office around 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, all of a sudden, a woman who had blankets and a large duffel bag beside her and appeared to be homeless started shouting at my daughter, cursing at her, telling her that she needed the Lord, and following right behind her. My daughter grabbed my arm, as did my son. I told them, let's just take a right by this monument and walk down to the police station, and she will quit following us, which she did. Because of this unfortunate happenstance, my daughter and my son are now scared to walk downtown at lunchtime or to get ice cream. And this is not something I would ever think any of my children would feel walking downtown. As a native, I too remember when downtown was unsafe. There were certain streets you just didn't walk on. We worked so hard to clean up the downtown area in the 90s, and we made this a wonderful place for families and tourists. I would like to know what our city has to make downtown safe for me and my clients. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Abby Y. Abby, your mic is now open. You can speak.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, y'all. I'm going to comment some on COVID, pandemic, and reparations. Buncombe County had 32 deaths due to COVID this past week alone. It's the most deaths we've seen since entering the pandemic a year ago. There were 1,000 new COVID-19 cases reported in 1 week, and we know that is an underreported number. Meanwhile, Asheville had its most profitable fall season for packing in hotels during a pandemic. This is something that I want to see on the tip of everyone's tongue. While water is being threatened to be turned off in this town, you tell us to wash our hands while there's been no rent freezes, and they'll tell us to keep social distancing during a housing crisis, while food insecurity is the highest we have seen in this county. Again, what are we doing to address this? There has been a promise of reparations that Asheville made national news coverage for the same week the Asheville Police Department was tear gassing children and citizens and shooting rubber bullets. Meanwhile, we are dying, and y'all create another task force. Meanwhile, we are dying, and y'all talk about building another hotel, and hotels are being packed. Meanwhile, Black and brown people are dying, and y'all build a Raytheon instead of pay reparations. We are forced to choose between food and medicine. People are forced to choose between keeping their houses and heating and water. Well, Asheville gets, there was a report or article that came out about Asheville having the highest crime rates. But what no one's talking about is how we are not having our basic survival needs met. We don't need police with fancier guns and new vests. We need to survive. We need our needs met. We need food. We need y'all to stop killing us, for tourism to stop killing us. We need Black and brown people and poor people to be prioritized. We need reparations to be paid. We need leisure travel to stop. We need y'all to care, to defund Asheville Police Department by at least 50% and to invest in the community. We need this community for Black and brown people to be centered. Thanks, y'all.
Council, our next caller is Zeno Lancaster.
Hello, everyone. Mayor Mainhamer and respected council members. My name is Zeno Lancaster, and I live in Asheville. I own 2 businesses in Asheville. I was born in Asheville 39 years ago, and I'm very proud of our city. I want to sincerely thank you all for considering my opinion tonight. I and others in my circle appreciate the hard work and thought you put into your decision making. I have no doubt that this job is difficult and often thankless. My point will not take long, but I hope you will spend adequate time thinking about what I have to say tonight. As is fairly common knowledge in the city, Councilmember Kim Roney voted against the city accepting a grant that would provide the Asheville Police Department with non-taxpayer funds to be used to purchase life-saving vests for our officers. In the very least, one thing that these heroes might ask the community for in return for their service and protection are life-saving bulletproof vests to protect them in the event that they are shot while working together with our community to protect its members. It's my humble opinion that there is no excuse nor logical reason why someone would vote against this grant. I asked her about this by email. She emailed me back saying what I interpreted as, and I'm paraphrasing for you, that the money wasn't needed by the department. They had enough to buy them already. It sure seems to me that money accepted for vests would mean that the APD could use other funds in their budget on things like further education for their officers and other equipment or services that most of us would agree are helpful for our community. Of course, disagreeing with that logic is her right as an elected official member. Her and I can disagree on that point and move on. I mention this to set the context for my point this evening, which is regarding the Citizens Police Advisory Committee. What I would like this council to explain to the community is why they have decided that Councilmember Roney is the best choice among them to be their representative on the Citizens Police Advisory Committee. I believe Councilmember Roney is a poor choice for such a position, as she has shown this council in that vote and in others that she does not represent the majority of the community she serves on issues of our police department. The rest of you all voted for the grant for these vests, and I assume you did so based on logic that is widely shared in our community. Further, the Citizens Police Advisory Committee was designed to have the community and the police department work together. Cannot rationalize how this can happen with your representative having voted against life-saving measures for one of these groups of people who I'd like to point out are also part of our community. I don't imagine any of you would turn away grant funds that pay for the safety of non-police officer citizens. How does voting against the same for police officers foster togetherness between the community and police department? I would respectfully request that this council consider replacing their current council member representative on this community whose voting history appears to me to evidence that she does not foster togetherness between these two groups of people, as she doesn't seem to even include police officers in the community at all. Neglecting this request would seem to me to completely defeat the purpose of said committee. Thank you for your consideration.
Council, our next and final caller is David Flyer.
Hi, good evening. My name is David Plyler. I live in the northwest area of Buncombe County. Prior to that, I was born and raised in the city of Asheville, lived in the city for many years. Calling in tonight because I'm concerned about the state of the city of Asheville. I work in the city every day, have clients that live in the city, certainly. Asheville has got a violent crime and a drug problem that's not being addressed. We recently made another top 10 list, not as glamorous as many of the other ones. This one is being in the top 10% of the most violent cities across the nation. We've got syringes that litter the sidewalks. Overdoses are rampant, and we have a homelessness problem that has exploded, and the city is doing little to address the issue. Meanwhile, our elected city officials and leadership have continually looked to place the blame for many of these issues at the feet of the city's police department, certainly unwarranted. I previously worked in law enforcement for many years in Buncombe County. I'm very well aware of the violent crime and of the out-of-control drug problem that exists here. Rather than address these issues, you instead choose to cater to special interest groups and the select few who continually call the police murderers without any basis or fact while you are working to fix the police department, when overwhelmingly the police are not the problem. Officers have left the department in droves, and they continue to do so. The citizens of Asheville are less safe, certainly, and crime is continuing to rise due to the actions and inaction of city council and staff. Meanwhile, our elected officials are focusing on how to reimagine the police, which is a ridiculous narrative in itself. My final concern is on Councilwoman Roney's vote against providing ballistic protection to our officers, which is a step in the wrong direction. The only thing that more perplexes me than her vote was the attempt at justifying it, which shows that she does not have a clear understanding of municipal budgets or grant funding, how that works. The appointment of her to the Citizen Police Advisory Committee is putting someone who has demonstrated their agenda against law enforcement in a position that they have no business serving in. And I would strongly urge you to reconsider this appointment and stop alienating our officers in the city before it's too late for the town that I was born in and grew up in. Thank you.
Staff, you said that was our last caller. I do have one other person that signed up. Is there anyone else in the queue? Staff, anybody? Are you out there? Oh, hold on. Okay, our last caller does not want to speak. Okay, so that concludes our agenda. And unless anyone else has any comments, I'm going to close out the meeting. Okay, all right, everyone, good evening. Thank you. All right.